there we go.
All them isms. What's up?
Hello, hello.
How you doing
Doing
today?
pretty good. Not
Yeah.
too bad. I always love having these type of conversations because when we really look at the development of not just our emotional intelligence, but also our awareness and introspection of mental health, when colonization came in, a lot of the requirement, the spirituality and
Mm,
the mindfulness of really being aware of one's emotions and mental health really dictated how we moved through this world. And we saw that reflected in the communities that created that type of responsibility to oneself, right? Through that autonomy of recognizing, like, oh, my emotions are making me feel X, Y, and Z because I'm
hmm
scared, and then you work on that thing. But it's always a constant reflection of yourself whenever you're experiencing emotion or, you're going through something that is trying your mental health. You need to take those moments to sit and like ponder because it's like building something on shaky foundation and not doing
Mm,
a land assessment. Like you can't
right.
do that. You can't build on shaky ground. And we need to start treating ourselves like the land we cultivate around us. The way we treat the earth is exactly like we treat ourselves under this consumerism where we always have to get some sort of benefit once we dig, dig, dig
Yeah.
without really recognizing what we're digging into. And so, yeah, I love
Yeah. And just like, yeah, just like you can leave the soil exhausted so that it can't yield any more
yes.
crops, that sometimes we don't look at our own mental capacity the same way as that. We're always asking from our body, asking from our mind to be able to deal with all the things that come our way and get what we want as desires, And it might be important to the mind and to what you socially want, but as for the physical body only needs or wants very few things: food, water, rest, and care, and things like this. So you might think, oh, yo, this is my life, these are my ambitions, but you have to be aware that you're marrying between multiple dimensions or bodies: your physical body, your mental and emotional body, and then your spiritual body. And some of those needs look differently sometimes. So you can't burn the candle on both sides and just go 100 without, like you're saying, is realizing which bodies that you're burning the most and replenishing those so that you can move on with balance. You're absolutely right about that.
Yes, 100%. And it's so key to think of yourself in those three different bodies and that they individually have their own needs, but that they're very much interconnected in how they operate and how they show up for you. And
Right.
so for me, because I've been doing a lot of like unlearning and learning about a lot of different cultures that really embodied a lot of the mental health and spirituality that we saw across the globe before,
Mm-hmm.
more patriarchal colonial religions came into play. All of them really predicated the entire idea of how we are the universe, right? So we
Right.
understand that we are comprised of what creates the universe around us. And so, in that same type of reality, and like thinking about how our world has come to what it is today, everything used to be a thought before it became something
Mm-hmm.
material. And so, even going through that process of like, the spiritual awakening and the reclaiming of culture and understanding and decolonizing one's mind, you start to really recognize like when you are thinking of it in that term or in that way of like, you are the universe. You really are.
Mm-hmm.
Your genetic makeup, the way we can trace back to the very, like our DNA sequence of just being incredibly like diverse and spectrum and deep. Like all of those things are for a reason and for a purpose. And in our ancestral line, we've got here, right? And we
Right.
have every opportunity to create those types of realities for ourselves, but it is how we talk to ourselves. And so like when it comes to critical thinking and looking at how our education system is really set up, we're not creating people or we're not uplifting and affirming people to really explore and expand and play with their emotional intentions and
Right.
understanding themselves to the point where you start to recognize that no one no one actually has any control over your emotions but yourself, and that
Period.
you have every ability to get to a point where nothing will ever phase you, but you need to work through what is making you avoid it in the first place. And that's the biggest bridge people don't want to cross, because that touches on avoidance, insecurities, fear, and that's largely what created the type of patriarchal conditioning that we have in society to begin with.
Yeah.
Mediocrity and insecurity got to the point of violence and weaponized itself to the point that it taught everyone to live like that, so that the
Say it.
people who could weaponize it and cause the most harm were able to utilize the system that was directly built for them in the most harmful way possible.
And profit from it and actually make it a
And profit.
system. Like we would think, and I was talking about this in a talk I did yesterday with Stoff, is like you would think that when you have the pre-colonial sets of cultures who were very much involved in cosmology, astrology, tantric yoga, different types of meditation,
Physics, math, like,
physics, even the priesthoods that focused a lot on the energetic healings of the chakras. And like we had all of these things before. And then along with colonization, of course, came chaos. And we
yes.
had a small group of people who used a lot of that secret knowledge we know to keep it from people, to promote a chaotic world so that they then could capitalize off the chaos. People would trade in their liberties for securities all of a sudden. People would, it just created a whole nother system. So I agree with it, what you're saying. And part of being critical thinkers is to, just like you said, realize how you react. You're not in control of what happens to you in some level, but you're always in control of how you react, like literally always. And
Yeah.
these people who created the system, we have to be able to understand how they predict that we're going to act, be aware of that so that we can act in a way that brings us more peace and them less power,
Yes, 100%, 100%. And realistically, the only way to get to that point is for you to thoroughly know yourself, that your insecurities can no longer be weaponized against you by the people who actively funnel money into the studies of psychology, sociology, communications,
Mm-hmm.
to know how to advertise and market to you in a way that touches on those insecurities, to get
Ah,
you to continuously buy into the solutions that they sell you while also maintaining the problem. And that's the two sides
yep.
of the same coin. Like I told you, remember our talk last time when I said, Republicans, Democrats, good cop, bad cop, but still both cops.
Yeah.
Um, that's how you get the most bang for your buck, is you play both sides. Like, war is continuously happening because the people who own most of the weapons sell to both sides and help instigate those wars, because it's a
Mm-hmm.
constant flow of income. And so, like, when we're getting to the understanding of critical thought and being critical of your own thought, whose
Mm-hmm.
voice is really in your head? Who
Right.
taught you what you're reciting? Who taught you what you've learned to date in the history books written by the winners, who avoid the
Mm.
accountability of their actions? Because you can't say one thing is genocide and then something else is justice. That's bullshit.
Real.
That's
That's
bullshit.
real. That's real. Even when it comes to your sense of inner justice and so-called revenge politics, there's always a better way. If not, you're just extending the cycle. And you might be on top this lifetime or even these few years, but you're creating a system where you're maintaining a system where somebody else is going to be on top another time. And unless you actually disassemble those gears of war and replace them with gears of peace, then you're just creating a perpetual cycle where the faces and the players change, but the system doesn't. Just like when we talk about the deep state, right? And this is what we were talking about Democrats and Republicans. It's like sometimes Democrats feel like, yeah, we voted those racist sons of guns out and now we're in control. But you have to understand that you're just the postage stamp on that same system of capitalist or so-called capitalist or westernized oppression, so that you're not really changing anything, and these little surface level laws we do are making little things holidays, it's not really going to ever shift the power. And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize when they're voting back and forth. Is that it's not changing anything, unfortunately.
Yeah, and before we get to those messages, I wanted to add to that. Like the greatest way I tell people to really recognize how the system is created, and no matter who is at the top, it's still a hierarchy of a
Hmm.
capitalistic world, is to look at it from the matrix ideology. Like the there's a lot of um what's the word I'm looking for right now? Like I don't want to say drama, but like the whole controversy, there you go, controversy around the Matrix is that it's actually stolen from a woman
Uh-huh. I heard about
the
her.
I forgot her name right now. Oh my God, she's
Sophia
on Stereo.
something.
Yes,
Yeah.
she's on Stereo.
Is she on stereo?
Yeah, she is. She talks about it. I will find her account at some point. Yeah,
Whoa.
like if you look up her name, you can find her on Stereo once you like Google her on the interwebs. But
Yo.
to use the Matrix, we understand Neo gets out and he's looking in at the system and what it does. And no matter who's at the top of the machine empire, as long as the machines are running, the empire runs, right?
Right,
They
right.
had to completely destroy the machines or at least do something to like remove them in order to bring back, some sort of semblance of wokeness, of free will, of creating a community that is encompassing and inclusive. But they had to be separated from it to begin with. We can't do that in this world because land is a resource and every government covets it. And so, um,
Mm.
when we're thinking about like the whole system of like Republicans and Democrats, it's the same thing as the Matrix. We are trying to be Neo on the outside, but realistically, what needs to happen is that the whole system needs to tumble in order for us to recreate and create things that will actively serve us in the ways that we always write about or put in the movies as utopias. But realistically, all it takes is actual discipline and a mindfulness of what
Mm.
the type of self-care we need to do for ourselves requires.
Exactly. I have something to add to that, but let's hit these ditties real quick and then we'll pick up right where you left off. That was hella eloquent.
Yeah,
We got
Bobby
Bobby Cisco
Cisco.
in the building. Talk to us, bruh.
So this whole like critical thinking, like Matt, like what you're talking about, like in a woman's mind, does it like is it compared to like a large like watermelon? Like I'm totally fucking confused with this. Like, can you collaborate with this shit?
Hmm?
What?
I didn't get it. Something about a watermelon and critical thinking. Let's see if he clarifies on the second time around.
So do you think that like government officials and like people who like run churches and stuff, like do they use that like type of like critical thinking and stuff?
Uh,
Or even towards like alcohol like programs and stuff, like where they like try to like mind manipulate you to like a certain extent to where you like think of one thing but in the overall you think of another thing. I don't know, prime example is like I like to eat bread, but in my mind I'm gonna say that I like to eat bread, but overall I fucking hate eating bread because it tastes like shit and it has no taste to it, like burnt toast.
Well, I'll say this is like, just like she mentioned earlier, the people who are in control have paid considerable amounts of money, from Freud to Carl Jung, to understanding how the human mind works. And when it broke down the shadow self, or the things that secretly drive our behavior that we don't consciously know about, immediately the Philip Morris cigarette brand, various car companies, and other people started making commercials that target your insecurities, that they famously started putting hot women and well-dressed men in the commercials. Overnight after those studies were published, entertainment and advertisements were changed to shifted to not show the product and what it does basically and what you need it for, but to to create consumers by targeting insecurities and secret desires that are under the iceberg effect. So the way that that plays into our politics is the exact same way. When you watch the news in 2020, just go back and watch some of the YouTube clips. What these people are doing on both sides, on Fox News and CNN, right and left, is they're playing on your deepest insecurities, your fears, your desires, your victimhoods, your things that make you mad, and they're manipulating this to get a specific response, so that then, you know, the government can push forward things. We know that the Democrats like to respond to crisis by pushing forward legislation while everybody's in crisis mode, and we know that the Republicans like to trigger people's emotions of not wanting things to change or keeping things traditional. So they use that data all the time, very much. So we'd be a fool not to realize the way we're being manipulated on a mass level and try to change our predictive behavior, which they're making a lot of money and political power off of, you know?
Yes, everything you said 100%. And to like briefly add my 2 cents, because like you touched on everything. When we think about language and when we think about how emotion is tied to language, because it's our communication, our main form of communication, we're continuously in this kind of dance with one another in terms of validation and attention, right? And so marketing, like in its essence, is how can I pull your attention to my product, whatever it is. Anything, everything is a product in a capitalistic world. So for example, since in the message it was the church, I don't want to
Keeping
I
it
don't
go
want to
there, y'all.
completely I don't want to completely dismiss and say that they're not aware of what they're doing, because, you know, abusive manipulation and coercion has been very much normalized in our everyday communication practices with each other. But you especially see it in the church because of, you know, like sin and what is considered good and bad and X, Y, and Z, the way it can actively harm your mental health and cause you to internalize a lot of, you know, hate. Granted, I know they're changing, but I have my own thoughts on that, and that's a whole different topic on its own. But when a lot of these conglomerate generational powers started was when they start to really recognize the power of spoken word. And, you know, for a majority of human existence, we are very orature based, where our communication practices and how we pass down information was word of mouth to memorize and then pass down, so on and so forth. And then, you know, the invention of the printing press and, you know, the invention of paper and writing and things like that changed the game, especially when the printing press was created. But the ability to really worm your way into the minds of people with repetition, you know, that's why those songs get into your head, because you're constantly hearing it over and over again to the point that it's unconsciously being played like a loop in your brain. You know, with that, it's really easy to recognize that, you know, I hear it all the time. It's in my brain, just constantly saying these things. But we never really question how our language, what we've been taught to, you know, tattoos, for example, have been demonized for so long. And now in 2021, everyone has a tattoo. But the whole idea behind that is that language, what we tell people, what we teach them, how we then enforce that thought with a punishment and then a binary of how to act, you know, in order to avoid being punished, you need to do this instead. And then, you know, purity culture really pushes perfectionism, and perfectionism in capitalism creates this consumeristic ideology and this internalized consumer mindset, where you're not only a consumer, but you're the product that also needs to be sold. And you constantly have to be out there selling yourself, but also be bought at the same time. And like, who's pulling your attention? Where's your money going? But who really is being fed at the end of the day with all of your attention and money being invested somewhere else besides yourself? And so The
Mm-hmm.
easiest way to get into someone else's mind and to get them to do what you want is to leave your voice within their brain, to leave your voice in their head, constantly either teaching them how to talk about themselves and how to see the world, or teaching them how to look at you for guidance and as an authority figure. And 100% the way that's done is with the study of psychology, of understanding how
Mm-hmm.
colors and body language and behavior and our reptilian brain of how we consciously and unconsciously go into fight, flight, fawn, and freeze when we're put in a position of survival, you know? Everything that advertisement kind of pulls and pushes on us is a mindset of survival, of like, you need to look a certain way in order to be chosen. You know, you need to be the most smartest person in order to be a choice at a job. But a lot of these things erase the reality of mental health, erases the reality of humanity and
Yes.
how we operate. And so we can see, like, once you start looking at things like that, you start to really see in history that shift, because the people who were in the most power, the people who caused the most harm created the most, you know, starvation and unrealistic gaps between those who are rich and poor. You
Yeah.
can actively see what those people did only to fill their own pockets, and we're literally repeating that history over and over again because it's consistently rebranded through propaganda. And that
And if
leads me,
it's, uh-huh, go
so
ahead.
I was going to say, and that leads me to close with, look into the book called Propaganda by Edward Bernays. He is
Uh,
like the granddaddy public relations consultant that everyone in communications is told to learn about. Like, I'm in communications. He is like the big pimpin' granddaddy, you know, however you want to color him, but he was the go-to, and his work is the go-to to really understand public relations and the very thin line it plays with propaganda.
yeah, public relations, that very phrase is, and thanks for sharing all that. And I will look that book up. It's like, it's really bordering on the lines of manipulating the status quo or defining what normacy is, right? What's acceptable in society. And when you're in the business of repeating things, repeating things, repeating things till people start to believe that they're true. And also as a teacher, when I'm, see, right now I teach third through fifth grade. I did teach kindergarten too. And we know that repetition is the way we teach young minds when it comes to practicing, their ABCs and such. But as you're talking about these groups of people that come up with things like, where did they learn repeating things enough times is how you pretty much brainwash someone? Well, they invested a lot of money, and you can follow the money and see the receipts of the people, especially in the early 1800s through the early 1900s, who they were funding. And then they came up with all these things, and then all of a sudden you get these think tanks. And for people who
Mhm.
don't know what think tanks are, they're basically a conglomerate of people who put together their resources and their information and hire lots of people to do their thinking for them. They all state that their goals are X, Y, and Z, and these think tanks will come up with how to get it done
Strategies.
with strategies, and it's usually under people's noses. Like, it's usually things that border on your subconscious, and it's somewhat manipulation of public opinion a lot of the
Yes.
times. And so it's where you get a lot of things from these think tanks. So it's just really important to know that when you see, like in 2020, when the black community is feeling some type of way and the white community is feeling some type of way, and they're clashing in the streets, when news preys on certain emotions to make certain things happen, when the government wants certain outcomes so that they portray certain things on the news, you have to understand that these are all, a lot of these things come from these huge think tanks, which you hear from.
Yes.
You hear about the Trilateral Commission. You hear about other groups like the Bilderberg groups, which are powerful people who put their money behind these psychological analysis and use this is where data comes into play, right? Now we
Yes.
have more data than ever collected on how people think, what they're interested in, what they go to, what they spend their money on. So when you have all these new forms of data with these groups, they can literally pretty much control the status quo or the public or the seeable world. So I just think it's really important that people need to understand that it's not, you don't need some crazy grand conspiracy theory. You don't need, you know, right out in the open, what we see and what we can follow the money is ways that they are using to control people, period. You know,
Yes, yes, 100%. And you know what? The only binary that you really need to be aware of is the fact that people either use their intention with the motivation of making the most money, or
mm-hmm.
they have the intention of going in with the most benefit for community. Because the opposition of going in for a narcissistic mentality of, me, my money, my money, my money, is
Right.
being part of and giving back to a community, right? So those are the two binaries.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you're looking at, and like I'll use this example with the church again, because as a lot of you are probably following in Canada right now, and eventually, hopefully, in the States as well, a lot of the residential camps, as I call them, because they were never schools, of, the Catholic Church kidnapping Indigenous children from their parents and from their culture to
Mm-hmm.
take them to these camps to erase their heritage, to erase their language, to erase every sense of self so that they are indoctrinated into Catholicism and just what is considered
Western thinking.
European,
Mm-hmm.
Western, purity culture. Um, the church today, or well, last year, because in Canada there's a reconciliation treaty that is supposed to be happening. There's almost, I believe, 72 things on that treaty that the government and I believe potentially the church agreed to do in order to reconciliate with different Indigenous peoples, Native, Métis, anyway. But um, they have only done, I think, like 15 to date out of 72, and this was introduced like years ago. And on top of that, one of the things was a type of monetary stipend of sorts to help, like a type of reparations, I believe, but not really. But basically, the church was supposed to pay like upwards of like, I think like 39 million or billion, I can't remember. But last year, the church said they could only muster up like 3.9 million. And then this year, they refurbished and rebuilt one of their churches for 128 million.
Right. And you didn't even, I think you were getting to, but because in the US they had that thing too, and there was a philosophy called kill the Indian, save the man, where they were trying to take the
Yes.
culture from these people. But then those same churches who are renovating and saying they can't come up with the money, they found what,
Yes.
200 bodies of unmarked graves of children buried on their premises. And that's happening in Canada, but I think some bodies have already been recovered at some of these re-education camps in the US, and we've barely even started. So it just
Yes.
shows you, once you dig it all up, the war
You
crimes and
can't
the
you can't
genocide. Oh
hide.
my God.
Yeah, the
You
war
can't
crimes and
hide
the
that.
genocide. But that exact thing of how I forget why we were talking about this, but just that whole thing of like, saying that they weren't able to like muster up something that has more importance to a group of people, but then, flip the narrative and come back and say we've made so much money for like this material thing, this church, this place for you to come worship, you
Hmm.
know, look how great
Hmm.
and grand we are, look at all the power we have. Like it plays on that
Ignore the
toxic
corpses under
positivity.
the floorboard.
Yes, ignore the corpses, like look away from that, it was in the past. We're different people, but it's like, no, your entire theology is based on that very thing that pulled out the worst in people. And like I
Right.
always say this, I'm like, when we look at like egalitarian cultures, like, a lot of indigenous cultures, or we look at a lot of the cultures from pre-colonial African countries, where the reality of mental health and spirituality was so ingrained and tied together that mental
Absolutely.
health was at the forefront, right? And like I know like right now the conversation is always like I saw someone post recently on my Facebook that you can have a therapist and Jesus. And I really wanted to comment and say, you know what, like I get it, but the idea of religion was supposed to be a mental health practice, and we've only seen the result of, you know, like we've only ever really seen the most negative or the most toxic of that type of religion manifests itself in society. And everything that we're
Mhm.
doing to date, therapy, you know, social work services, re-education, et cetera, all of these were the foundations of all of the quote unquote savage cultures that European
Mm,
civilization erased. So the question
yeah.
is, were they really savages, or were the barbarians really coming in with their projection of what their accomplishments has been to date in
Yep.
order to dictate that that's where humanity was now at in terms of intelligence? And it's like the Aztecs
Mm,
had running water and their cities were so damn clean, something that
mhm,
was foreign to the British. Like
mhm.
all of these things, you know, once you learn all the pieces and you put together the bigger puzzle, you start to really recognize like we didn't progress, we regressed. And all
We,
of that
yeah. Go-
and all of that was because of propaganda and what we were told and what was erased because, like I said earlier, history is written by the winners. And as
mhm.
we're seeing in Texas right now, as they're trying to get rid of critical race theory and also not teach about Dr. Martin Luther King or, you know, anything that actively spoke out and about white supremacy,
Mhm.
all of those things are being threatened to be erased. And then the conversation and the narrative that will be perpetuated is that the KKK actually wasn't that bad. Do you like that
I
is
see that.
how that is
Yeah.
literally how the world has come to date. The erasure of reality to replace it with a type of intentional propaganda that at the end of the day serves the people who are at the highest class who reap the most benefits from that privilege.
Right. All right. I got a little something on that. Let's hit these ditties and then we'll go right
Oh
back to your
damn, there's
point.
four? Jeez.
Yeah. Of retelling history in a way that benefits the elite and maintains the status quo. So
Yes.
let's hit these, Bobby.
With all this information that you told me and stuff, like how like does this like have any like sort of like common things towards like Star Trek universe?
Starjack. I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is?
No. Did he say I thought he said Star Trek, but
Oh, Star Trek. Yeah, you might be right. Let's keep going.
You guys haven't answered my like first question that I asked and stuff. Like, how's this like resemblance to like stuff? How do you like stuff? And but like, how is a perfectionist and a capitalist like have two things in common in like the government and stuff? Like, you know, it's trying to like compare like pears and oranges to like who has the bigger butthole among your friends when they like look at it with each other and
The
stuff.
biggest
Can you
butthole.
elaborate?
uh,
Um,
well, I
did he
guess
say?
the very
Yeah, go ahead.
TLDR, capitalism and perfectionism is based
Oh,
on productivity. ROIs of a capitalistic world requires the best of the best at the cheapest rate at the fastest time, right? That
mhm,
would, in essence, be considered perfectionism. Now, when we look at government, which is the ultimate leadership of our business of a country, most of them are the most mediocre who through nepotism got the positions or through a lot of
mhm,
cajoling of very wealthy benefactors to be put in a position where they're seen as the truth and the most informed, but in reality they're the most privileged with the most money. And so when we really look at it, it's like the people who are at the grassroots movements, if they had the same money as these senators and leaders with their educational background, would they not be the better option? Yes, they would. So people with all that money who are not doing the work to educate themselves, is that intentional or unintentional to not be aware of how your country is actually, or like if we're going to go lower, like, you know, city, province, whatever, state, whatever capacity of like governmental branch you're at the end of the day, if you're not actively collecting the data of everything that is going on in your system to really figure out how to filter it to the point that it's beneficial to everyone, not impossible, but takes work. You're not doing your
Yeah.
job as a leader because you're only there with the intention of only being beneficial to a certain mindset or a certain like ideology or thought process that at the end of the day, when you put it on the scale, still only benefits a certain amount of people. Now, the question is why? Why is that benefit there for only a certain amount of people when in reality we have a community, like if we're looking at countries where people are actively playing their part in some way, but still being ridiculed and excluded from even the most basic needs.
Hmm. Hmm. And also, one of the things that I think about is I always think about that pyramid, right? That pyramid of the industry where you have the wealthy elite few at the top, and they're dictating norms and practices for everyone below them. And so when you think about it in terms of capitalism, like for example, let's look at the farming industry, where in America we produce these many chickens, these many cows, um, millions and millions of acres of land, millions and millions of gallons of water to produce, right? And then when you look at it, you see that these chickens, these the livestock is being treated horribly, chained up to a small corner, pumped full of all kind of steroids, led to the slaughter in the most cold machine type of way, right? If you came in outside looking into planet Earth and you just looked at that, you say, wow, these humans are some screwed up people. What would make them torture, manipulate, and pump these animals full of chemicals? Well, that individual farmer isn't a bad person. What happens is at the very top, the industry standards, you have these elite people with the money and control dictating things by either incentivizing or subsidizing or penalizing people. So by
Yes.
simply them setting norms, simple, all they're doing is punching numbers, they can make the conditions for humans below them in that pyramid to act in an incredibly horrendous way to meet those numbers. So we have to look at these people who are at the top dictating these numbers, incentives, and subsidies. And that goes in every single facet. It happens in Hollywood. It happens in the farming and agriculture. It happens in the military industrial complex. So until we address these few people that are at the very top using these elite ways to manipulate and incentivize people to act this way, these are the people that are setting the norms for society and why we behave this way. So if you have any valid criticisms of capitalism, or if you say, hey, capitalism isn't the problem, we still need to look at the tip of that pyramid, because it is by far the biggest problem in the world. When you think of thermonuclear war in the end world scenarios, when you look at depletion of the environment or destruction of the ozone layer,
Resources. Yep.
resources, everything you look at that could be the end or the collapse of society has to do with these group of people. But in America, especially, this American dream of capitalism, we protect and shelter them because they give us the illusion that one day we could be like them. Oh, we don't want to
Yes.
disassemble that. We don't want to disassemble that system, because one day I want to be at the top of that pyramid. And for that, these people with massive generational wealth, we're letting them pick apart the planet at no benefit to us. And we don't want to change it because we are, like the propaganda has told us, this is the best economic system and that it's fair and everybody gets a fair shake. And it could be you next. It could be you, you know?
Yeah, it's really easy to steal everything and then dictate the rules in a way that benefits you remaining at the top. Like, if we were truly in a capitalistic, as capitalism likes everyone to think, truly in a position where everyone actively had the same type of advantages or ability to get to the top, we would be seeing everyone prospering. But
Right.
at the end of the day, If everyone had the same toolbox and were taught how to use the tools, they'd be able to build their own tables. But some people don't have all the tools in their toolbox because they were excluded. Some people don't have toolbox. Some people don't have access to the IKEA guidebook that they need to read in order to build it first. You know, like these
Mm-hmm.
are all parts of the barriers and the hurdles that a lot of people who have been, you know, at the hands of intergenerational trauma, who've been pillaged and you know, plundered and exploited. Like, we're gonna see the biggest migration of human beings in the next 10 years because of what capitalism has done to our planet.
Mm.
We are actively reverting back to the times where we had to migrate in order to survive because of how terribly we've consumed and just, like, you know, without any mindfulness, just consume to the point where now we're exploiting and over, what's the word I'm looking for? Not overindulging, but
Overexhausting.
overexhausting. Yes, thank you. We're
Mm-hmm.
overexhausting everything. Look at us as humans. We overexhaust ourselves. Of
Oh
course,
my
we're
God.
overexhausting our world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you brought up those treaties with the Native Americans. What we had in this situation, and I get it. Let's pretend for a second. I'm going to pretend for a second that since the civil rights, since the 60s, there's absolutely no racism in America. It's fair and square. Everyone can make it. Let's just pretend that that's the case, right? What you had in the Native American community alone is you had a group of people come over to this land, and the Native Americans, after some debate amongst themselves, said, hey, let's accept these people. Let's help them get through their first winter. We're going to share with them the how to, you know, have agriculture.
Survive, how
We're going
to
to help them
hunt, how
survive.
to
We're going to help them do all these things and live in this land. And then you had this same group of people invite all their mom and dad, sister, brother, uncle, best friends, cousins, fiancés, and everybody over and literally take the land from these people. And that's not it. You had massive genocide. You had biological warfare. You had in slavery, you had education camps. You had them adopting mass numbers of their children, incentivizing the parents to relinquish control of their kids so that they could, what they were told, have a better life. But instead, the excavations now show that they were killing these kids, probably abusing who knows what kind of molestation on a massive level, right? And then you want to say that, well, America's a fair place. We're better than that now. We're different. There's multiple opportunities to prove that. For example, the North Dakota pipeline. Instead of all of the treaties you broke and made, and after the Trail of Tears, all you had to do was when these indigenous people said, hey, this land is sacred to us. Not only that, but if you build this pipeline here, it's going to contaminate our water and make things very bad for us. You had a collective part of this country who believes in capitalism over people, corporations over people, say no. The protesters were beaten by the law, the long arm of the law, beat these people, shot them with rubber bullets, arrested them, and proceeded to dig up their sacred burial lands and put pipes through so that we can eke out some more money and squeeze more resources out of our land. And the way, what they said, the benefit that even a lot of poor people gaslit the Native American community. It's like, why are you standing against progress? This is creating jobs. Absolutely stupid, ridiculous, capitalist, Western perception of it. So this is a way you're continuing the injustice for your own benefit. This is literally the same thing as the Trail of Tears, pretty much. So I don't want to hear that, oh, America's different. Hey, that's the past. Get over it. We're equal opportunity. We do everything for everybody now. We need to understand that the people at the very top of those pyramids decided that it would be an economically beneficial move and it would trickle down, but still it was their call to do that. There's no reason why you, poor and common white people, or poor and common people of all races, should defend their decision based on, hey, they said we'll get jobs out of it. Stop standing against progress. We need to say, no, if we're going to live up to the American creed that everybody wants to believe is true, then we need to stand up for it and stop bowing down to the corporate interests of a few, you know?
Yep. 100%. 100%. And like, just to quickly touch on like the pipelines, like Like indigenous women across the land are the number one demographic to be raped and murdered at
Mm,
astronomical rates. And the number one way that happens is through man camps. And man camps are only ever pulled up and propped up on these pipelines where they go into these communities that have been prospering well without interference, trying to reclaim the
right.
culture, trying to cultivate the lands and make it sustainable again. And as everyone's been following, climate crisis that we're in
Mm-hmm.
is directly the result of our constant terraforming of this planet and not replenishing the lands as they should be, not being sustainable, not taking care of it. Aboriginal and Indigenous peoples have been doing this for generations of cultivating and creating the land and repurposing it in a way to allow it to be prosperous. And in those camps, that's where we see the largest amount of harm happen to these women and girls
Mm-hmm.
and two-spirited individuals. And this is largely another form of colonization that we still
Mm-hmm.
see being
Absolutely.
performed today, but only under the name of capitalism. Both
Absolutely.
these
Yeah, and free markets. Before we hit these ditties, I'll just say free market is wonderful.
alive.
Nobody's going to argue against free markets, but that's not what we have with this version of Western capitalism.
Yep.
This is corporatocracy, plain and simple. And on
Yeah.
our country, I think it's the same in yours. Is that corporations, in the eyes of the law, are considered people. They have
People, yeah.
rights.
When they, oh my God, when you learn about how corporations lobbied to the courts to be seen as individuals so they
Yeah.
could scapegoat themselves out of all accountability for their
Mm-hmm.
conglomerate emissions, that
Mm-hmm.
is when you know they don't give a shit about anything else but their bottom line.
Exactly. And now that they have these, like Elon Musk and these other millionaires, billionaires are taking flights into outer space with that new Blue Liner jet. It's like they have no problem. And some of them have bought mineral rights to places like Mars and the moon. So we see where they're going with this. We see that all these post apocalyptic movies about um, everybody on the bottom of the totem pole in these poor slum like worlds where there's these really high city rises where the elite live in decadence at the expense of
Yep.
everyone else, and they ruin Earth to the point where it's inhabitable and they can just leave and go to the next planet or Mars, and leave us with all the consequences. This is what they're building the atmosphere for, and by us just
For
letting them
Mars,
do it.
yeah.
Yeah, and we're just saying, oh, but they're making jobs. We got to protect the job creators. And in America, it's ridiculous. We hear that so often. Is like they're too big to fail. We got to bail them out. Why? They shouldn't be taxed. Why? They should get unfair advantages. Why? Oh, because they create jobs. Anybody who creates a product or creates a business is going to be creating jobs. Plus, there's also many jobs that are available that people, like, for example, working in an Amazon warehouse. Yeah, Amazon has created the opportunity for a lot of people to work in the warehouse, but other people would still have opportunities to be teachers, lawyers, doctors, healthcare workers. You can walk to anybody in that Amazon assembly line and say, "Hey, is this your dream job?" And they'll say, "No." What is your dream job? And they'll tell you, and it's not being in that assembly line. So jobs, the market will regulate itself. The last thing I'll say before I yield is that I was having this was one of my first debates online. Some guy, there's this video called The Story of Stuff. It's still a good video. You guys can search it up. And it talks about how in the West, especially, we use resources to capitalize, blah, 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 blah. And so it was talking about the depletion of the environment. And so this guy argued with me. I forgot what I commented on, but he argued and said, um, people like you are standing against progress. You're like basically calling me a tree hugger, this and that, and this and that. And I'm like, yo, this video shows that this isn't lies. These aren't numbers. These aren't fake numbers. Is that we're consuming and consuming, blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, look, by the time resources are critically low, the market will regulate itself. That's the beauty of capitalism, is that people won't,
Wow.
he said people won't be able to afford them, so they won't get bought up. And I said, who do you think that benefits? For people like average people like you and me that can't afford like a can of beans because it's too rare, So basically, the people with the most money are always going to have a great supply because they can pay whatever, and all the rest of us are just going to have to lose our environment and our resources. Like, when you put it that way, you see how that benefits the ultra rich, period.
I literally say this all the time, that we're in the modern day medieval ages. And
Yeah.
that when we're looking at our society, like realistically, a lot of the colonial monarchies that became the way they did
Hmm.
looked at all of the African and indigenous hierarchies
Hmm.
of leadership and thought that their mental health issues, in European colonialism, was the reason that put them in power. So, there's
Hmm.
there's now academia coming out that apparently the whole concept of people building the pyramids being enslaved is like incorrect
Absolutely
and
false. Hmm.
false and false, because realistically those people were so enamored and so appreciative of their leadership and of their community that it was like giving back to the spirits.
Hmm.
They came to pray and pay in labor to build up these sanctuaries, build their community up, because
Yeah,
to be spiritually tied to your community is to be tied to the almighty source. And that's how a lot of
exactly.
those communities operated. But, when it came to a lot of white culture and colonial culture, the narcissism that's inbred into those ideologies is completely opposite of what everyone else was doing. And so
Hmm.
that shifted with colonialism and them coming in, changing everyone's mindsets of what we should be doing, how we should be thinking, what we should realistically say about capitalism, consumerism, et cetera, et cetera. Now, when we look at it, literally, we're becoming the very people that had to leave Britain to come over and settle in abundant land because the people
Right.
who were the most wealthy were consuming everything to the point of starvation for everyone else. Now look at our world.
Yep.
The exact same thing, but global.
Exactly. And if there's one redeeming quality about America, it's that you could say that partly, of course, the elite were infiltrating it and co-opting it every step of the way, but still, it was that. It was in Europe, the oligarchies, these monarchies had gotten so powerful and had so much control of the land, labor, and capital that people felt like the only option was to leave and start
Yes.
new, right? And so,
Yes.
unfortunately, to leave and start new is to take advantage of someone else and become the very evil you were fleeing to escape. At the same time, you're complaining about taxation without representation, which is a very light form of oppression. You are literally committing genocide and slavery on this new land for yourself and not even realizing that this is the evil that you created. And really quickly, what you said about the pyramids and other ancient monuments is people have to understand that these are skilled laborers. These are
Yep.
not slaves like people you just snatch up off the street and say, hey, go build a pyramid. These are skilled laborers in architecture and architects and mathematicians. These are our modern day geniuses. And there was probably some crude tasks that other people could do, but we've now uncovered multiple residents of the architects. We know who they are. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Like
so the
math
other,
is from Egypt. Like people don't like Pythagorean theorem. That
oh,
wasn't
please.
Pythagoras. It was
No, it
from
wasn't.
Egypt.
Geometry was literally created by ancient Kemetic landowners to divvy up the land on farmlands. You know, they
Yep.
would take strings, make triangles in the ground, and calculate the distances, the slopes, the angles. And so this is where we got that cosmology, astrology, all these things, the study of the stars. The Sumerians knew about Pluto, the precession of the equinox, which takes 2,000 years of constant observation to even notice.
Yep.
We don't even know how they knew about this. These ancient cultures knew about all of these things. And then after European colonization, I mean, not to mention Africa and Egypt were full of ancient mystery schools, which people like Pythagoras and Herodotus and
Yeah.
Archimedes, these people studied there, and they gave credit to these African schools of knowledge. But less than a few generations later, we erased all that history. The Alexandria Library was burned down, where we had all kinds of wonders from the ancient world. And now put these new people in the position to take advantage. Once again, we're not
Yep.
talking about the common and poor white person or the Greek person, because unfortunately they make the same mistake that we're making on a large level now, is they let those people at the top of the pyramid dictate and tell them it was for their own good. So now these people are hoarding through fear and intimidation, through propaganda, through manipulation, through bribery. And let's not forget, Rome pretty much revolutionized how to pacify people with entertainment. These Roman Colosseums, these spectator sports, the bloodletting made people feel like they were a part of the elite class when they really weren't. And that continues to America. Look at American football. Look at the Olympics. Look at sports. So what we're seeing, and I'll just wrap it up by saying, if you look at the enemy of the common person, we're looking at their evolution. Their evolution is our de-evolution. They've become craftier, smarter. They know how to manipulate us better. Not only Sigmund Freud and these other psychologists from current day, they also had it from the past. And when they're colonizing the West and the Templars are running through the Holy Lands, they're stealing ancient artifacts, ancient writings, studies of the mind, body, and soul, thousands upon thousands of years of information that is now locked in the Vatican secret libraries that they're still using to manipulate us. But also the tantric yoga, the chakras, the meditation, the yoga, the healing, the practices that Essene and the other Nazarenes like Yeshua practice have been taken away from us and hidden from us. So we got to wake up to it. We got to wake up to the people at the tip of that pyramid and see that this is going on 3,000 years of us letting them get away with rebranding their problem reaction solution think tank mentality that's fucked us all over. We got to get smarter.
100%. And like, to just quickly add on to that before we go on to the rest of the messages, the biggest thing, and like this is why I said the communities and the cultures that heavily tied spirituality and mental health together absolutely flourished, and it's a reason why we have a lot of these streams of information that we've seen from a lot of historical ancestry that are things that still apply today, because the human study, the actual study of human, has been happening as we've been learning as a species since our inception on this planet. And like you said, like that information is largely erased from everyone else. Like, why aren't you learning about it? But that information is locked up somewhere because we're not allowed to read it. Why would we not be allowed to read it? Like, it makes no sense. And so the whole conversation about mental health, and why I said the ties between mental health and spirituality in a lot of these pre-colonial cultures were so important, and what led to their actual evolving through intellectual conversations was the fact that whenever they recognized in people signs of depression or anxiety, they as a community supported them in a way that they were allowed and able to be and see themselves as, vulnerable in that moment, but then work through it, introspect, work with the community to get to a place where they get better. And when we look at how narcissistic European colonial culture came into the picture, they left their lands because of how terribly they've been treated. And that intergenerational trauma from internal culture then became their external projections on everyone else. Because that trauma, that mental health trauma that was put on them from the monarchy and from the class of people who were so greedy that they let their literal community starve for their enjoyment.
Period.
Those people caused so much mental harm on those who were starving to survive, pushed into survival mode, that they were pushed into different lands where they did the same thing that their classes did to them. Probably even worse. And then did that all with the savior complex, because what a lot of rich people like to do, act as if they're God on earth.
Right. And okay, let me get to these ditties, because that brought up something else I want to say. But if I keep going, me and you'll just keep going, because you're full of so much. All right, fire. Let's go. All right, ditties. Bobby.
So yeah, you said you were a third and fifth grade teacher and stuff. You know, I got a buddy. His name is Hank Hill and shit. You know, he's honestly like pretty pissed off about this whole like Common Core math shit. So like, he is a highly like representative like congressman in some like little town out in like Oklahoma, and it came to a point like, you know, we tried to ask a kid like what is 2 times 2. You know, they couldn't even like figure that shit out, or even like learn how to use a calculator or a computer, like basic general knowledge stuff, you know. Yeah. And to highly put this information and like subliminal messages and shit. So like when they try to get like a job, you know, they're highly not successful, and then like they try to like brainwash them to be like,
ooh, yes, our education system low-key mirrors a 40-hour work week when we tie in homework and then getting you to normalize doing extra work that doesn't benefit you in any way, but for the benefit of someone else.
Right. Regurgitating information that has no actual practicality in your everyday life. We are telling you need to know this just because. We're not giving you critical thinking skills for you to be able to figure out life. We're giving you the basic skills for you to join our workforce. And in the 1800s, when the American school system, based off of the Prussian school system, was made it was made compulsory in the late 1880s. Basically, you would go to jail if you didn't send your kid. And from the way that the desks were arranged to the way that the teachers were situated to give information, the way the tests were administered, the way the bell rang to get kids to move to the next section was all heavily based on making kids immediately digestible and work for the workforce. They were made so that corporations could have a steady flow of workforce that were just, as George Carlin said, just smart enough to push the button and not smart enough to ask any questions or reevaluate things. So as a teacher, I'm constantly trying to make sure that even though I'm just a small gear in the wheels, that at least in my classroom, I'm teaching critical thinking and advocating for life skills, and then also trade skills, that when we teach kids how to use their hand and their minds for skills that make them money, they become the boss of themselves. They can literally, without a boss, go out and say, hey, I know how to fix cars. I'll fix your car. Hey, I know how to do this, that, and this and that. But we've eliminated trade skills in our schools. We've eliminated art and music, things that contribute to mental health and free expression, only to push people further and further into this dichotomy. Right. And those people at the top of the pyramid then dictating the norms of what's normal, so that when people hit their 25s or 30s, they have all these expectations of what we said life should be. And this is why you have midlife crises. Oh, you're not married. Oh, your career is not this. Or you're not making this much. Oh, and all these social pressures that contribute to this mental health deficit that makes people literally flip out. We have so many workplace shootings and school shootings in the US, and we're not wanting to attach that to the root causes, which is making people cogs in the machine of this rat race and taking their individuality from them on a personal, social, emotional level, but then cramming individualism down their throat when it comes to consumerism. Oh, you should be able to buy what you want. You should be able to buy what you want. You should be able to. It's totally. It's a racket.
We can talk about this forever.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, once whoever started the colonization of the mind through language, when that was discovered, the power of that, and obviously the introduction of money, when you're not predicating emotional and mental health to rectify and recognize in yourself in the first 7 years of your life, because that is the most optimal time to teach children, we're not equipping them with the tools to self-regulate, they will always project whatever internalized fear or hate they have on whatever they're taught to hate and fear. And that is why we're still in this position of 2021 looking at and seeing the result of lack of emotional intelligence. And now
Mm-hmm.
suddenly we have every damn corporation recognizing that, oh, in order for us to be inclusive and equitable and diverse, to actually get people to perform in their most optimal way, emotional intelligence and mental health is the bedrock of that. Like, if you don't have those things, you will lose talent. We always hear the conversation of, it takes one bad manager to lose your entire team of geniuses or whatever. Like, it
Mm,
only takes one bad manager. And like work culture, like all of these conversations always come back to the conversation of mental health and emotional intelligence. Two
mhm,
of the very things that were ingrained in our societal culture before colonization. And like, this is why when we're looking at everything within a colonial system, it has to be questioned, because the only reason we have weekends is because of unions, which is largely a socialist idea. The only
mhm,
reason why we're in 5-day work weeks is because we can't do 7. And now we're going down to 4 and seeing the same results, if not better performance from people who are in 4-day work weeks. Like our education system,
mhm.
the way we're integrated with and talk about the environment. Like, one of the things that people don't recognize, because it's never taught, is our current conversation and cultural understanding of the earth itself is largely centered around how we can consume it.
Yep.
When you go look at and research into a lot of indigenous cultural awareness and the language of speaking about the earth, it largely speaks about our coexistence and our dependency on
Mhm,
and the respect of balance of how we tend to the earth and the earth tends to us, and the conversation around that. And there's so many things that we've seen, and the prosperity of it was seen in action because those cultures have been cultivating to that point equitable societies again since we were able to talk and we started learning and questioning and expanding and exploring, to the point where we got to a lot of those cultures and communities where women could literally walk with their boobs out and no man would rape
mhm,
them because they weren't seen as a sexual object. That
mhm,
to me isn't barbarity. That is civilization, because my body is being seen for the reality of what it is, allowing me
mm,
to live in my body without sexualization, and leaving that to be a moment when I'm between a partner and someone else. That was the type of society that women could enjoy. Now we see this conversation of, oh, men can't control themselves. That's not the problem. The problem is that boys are erased from the conversation of emotional and mental health, that they are always constantly put in the state of insecurity so that they always have to be in competition to be seen as worthy. And that is
right.
a bullshit logic. No person should have to go through that. But we recognize the toll it has on mental health, and we're only starting to talk about it now, reclaiming those conversations that used to be part of our culture before colonization. This is why we always
Speak.
question. We always question. We always have to be critical. We need to recognize what we as a society have to do to revolutionize how our future generations will live.
Period. All right, let's hit these ditties and we got some more on that. For reals. Let's go. Bobby.
Well, my great friend, his name was Calhoun. Very highly successful Native American and stuff. And he told me this like similar story when I was a kid back in like 1999, and like this is like 200 years of like where like the United States and stuff went in and like stole like millions of like land and stuff, and then with that whole story of like Lewis and Clark and stuff,
Mm.
from what I heard, they took advantage and they raped the woman, and she was forced to marry one of the men. I'd like your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on that.
Mm. Pocahontas is no different. The way America tells that story, you would think it's
Yep.
this beautiful story of unity and consensual. No, that was a 12 to 14-year-old girl who was taken advantage of and who was used as a political bargaining token in a bid to gain favor, only this so that you could backstab and take these people's land. Like, it's crazy. And real
Disgusting.
quick,
Disgusting.
yeah, and in even Thanksgiving. So while I understand if some people are saying CRT, the way it's being presented by the Democrats, will cause some division, I can see that. But at the same time, people need to understand that we've already had critical race theory that's in favor of
Yep.
European colonization
Yep.
since day one. Like,
Yep.
literally, to tell that story of Pocahontas to us, I remember learning about that in school and then learning about it as adults. The story of the Thanksgiving dinner, absolute
Yep.
BS. The portrayal of Christopher Columbus as a hero and an adventurer. This dude was a terrorist, a genocidal maniac, and a
Yep.
rapist. You know,
Yep.
so I understand that a lot of people have been taught these things for generations. That, why are you attacking that? It's tradition. Just leave it the way it is, or don't affect it. But you don't understand that the historical
That's
origins.
purposeful.
It's absolutely purposeful at the top, but I'm talking about poor and common white people that don't understand. They don't
Oh, yeah,
understand
yeah.
because they bought into the lie that this white savior that the Europeans came across. Sure, there was some bad things, as they call it, a little bit of slavery and a little bit of murder. Anybody would have done it. It happened all the time. But from that, the savage world needs to be grateful, because now look, we have this modern day, technologically advanced, morally superior society, right? And so it's really important to realize that we have been teaching anti-critical race theory for 200 years, where we're
Yep.
villainizing indigenous and so-called savages, or not even teaching about African or other cultures' pre-colonial history, which is absolutely essential to having a full picture. So by doing that, we're creating these innocently prejudiced white people of today who will feel like they're being triggered and attacked when we try to teach actual facts of history. They'll say, well, get over it. Why are you bringing that up? We don't need to talk about that, because our entire school system has been teaching a false view of reality. And even as far as American history, the Daughters of the Confederacy have spent a lot of time and resources to reteaching American race relations and history, to the point where it's not,
It's
I
not
don't
the
even know
truth
if I can go
at
any
all.
further on that.
Like, I'll jump in. Like,
Yeah.
the whole ideology behind what is taught in school, and it's like I said, always written by the winner,
Right.
because the people who control the narrative control the impact, right?
Right.
And so when we're thinking about the people who, especially who didn't have the resources or the luxury or the privilege of education, when we're talking about a lot of the indoctrinated people, the very idea of putting white skin as a savior complex
Mm.
led most mediocre people who were so insecure or still trying to figure out themselves, because they're constantly in survival mode, not able
Mm-hmm.
to fully be abundant in themselves because they didn't have the time to. But it gave them this moral superiority complex, like we talked
Mm-hmm.
about, from just being white. So they felt like they lived their purpose they needed to live, because they came to colonize the barbarians, who, at the end of the day, were the ones that taught them how to survive.
Period.
Like,
And no, yeah, you're absolutely right. And here's the thing, though. I saw this guy was debating Joe Rogan on why Western civilization is superior. And I could totally see, if you're from this generation and you have cell phones and television, all this gnarly technology and fancy clothes, and then you look and say America has all these freedoms and religious superiority, I could almost not fault you for thinking that. But let's be
yep,
clear, and this is why it's so important that they don't want to teach you actual history, because you'll see what a lie that is. First of all, some of the reasons this guy was saying was, look at our economic system and look at the resources. We became a rich nation where people have blah, 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 blah. But let's be clear. The
Who did
entire
we exploit?
wealth, right? The entire system of wealth, the entire pool of resources, and our fast ascension to the top military superpower in America, not only in America, but all through Western colonization, Africa, 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 Africa. I mean, the oil from Africa and Middle East has been essential.
The
The
metal for our technology
the
alone.
coltan, which we use in all of our technology, the gold that we've been using in American finance system in our, Fort Knox and all these things, diamonds, not to mention the very people of Africa. And then you talk about the Caribbeans, the sugar cane, the
Yep.
tobacco that we stole from the Native Americans. Like, there is nothing about our economic system that came from the wealth of the colonizers themselves. Everything was
Yep.
stolen, first of all. Second of all, let's talk about religion. Let's talk about our blonde-haired, blue-eyes Jesus Christ. All right? Let's really talk about it. Is that when Europeans came into contact with the North African continent, and this is where Abrahamic and Judeo Christianity came from. The first Jews and Christians were dark-skinned people from that area. And primarily all of the Hebrew-speaking Ethiopians of this day are living unchanged in some places. They've been speaking Hebrew and practicing their version of Christianity since before it was given the white makeover, okay? Then you had the Renaissance era. You had the Pope painting his son to replace
Yep.
the image of Jesus. And
Yep.
then from that point, now listen, at this point, Christianity and Judaism was practiced in some temples with worship, rituals, and all of these things. Early Christianity was practiced in people's homes where women were the primary masters of ceremony because their realm was the home. So women were in essence the church leaders. Then all of a
Yes.
sudden, when it was taken over by the Europeans, you had blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus that was used specifically to colonize the rest of the world. There was the Templar order who raped, pillaged, and the Pope said, any wrong you do on this war, you will be absolved of because this is a holy war. So go ahead, rape, pillage, burn, and kill as you will. And that happened. We talk about the missionaries who went from continent to continent, enslaving and re-educating and genocide of people in the name of this new blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus. There's nothing morally superior about the European version of Christianity that guy was talking about. And third, we talk about our military that rushes to the aid of everyone and helps everyone. Listen, I can admire some things about the American military, but let's be clear. Unfortunately, we talked about the top of that pyramid multiple times. The military-industrial complex is different from the soldiers where the rubber meets the road, our brothers and sisters who volunteer or who join the service. But unfortunately, they can be used to act like stormtroopers as world police all across the world. We have more military bases around the world telling other people what to do. We want to say that Russia is interfering in our elections, and we want to cry about China. We've interfered in more elections than any other nation. We've toppled and killed more government regimes and duly elected democratic presidents of other nations than any other place. So to hell with his argument. I say all that to say he was wrong. Go America.
100%.
America number one.
100%. And before we get into these bubbles, because I need to
Yeah.
say, to add on to what you're saying, when we look at a lot of pre-colonial cultures and the way they used to operate, the affirmation of emotional intelligence and the respect behind allowing people to talk about what their emotions are causing within them in order to get to a place where it's no longer holding space within them and causing them that depression because they're expelling it. When we look at how those cultures treated their home like the church, so there didn't need to be any money invested out of your church, your home, right? Because why would you need to go to another building to still be religious? Now, true, right? So the fact that your home was your church, and then women were the priests, because largely when we're talking about spirituality and mental health, women do have a greater capacity to be introspective and to really reflect on emotions, which put them at
Mm-hmm.
the hierarchy of spiritual leaders, because it allowed a lot of men, especially their husbands and their children, to recognize within themselves how to emotionally be intelligent and autonomous, to
Right.
recognize what is affecting them and how to control it or use it or cope with it, whatever, but how to individually be all right to be alone without being lonely, to be happy without
Mm.
expecting happiness to be external. You know, all of these things. That was the point of the church, for you to grow into the best version of yourself, because you are the universe. God is you. You are
Right.
God. Like, your reflection and how you embody yourself and what you embody spirituality is then reflected in how you interact with your community and how you interact with the land. And we saw how all of those cultures were sustainable. The allowance and the
Mm-hmm.
fact that both men and women were equitable and able to go into society and live their best authentic self. You know, if a woman was a warrior and a man was a chef at in their community, whatever it was, they were given the ability and the awareness to figure that out, one, and to go
Mm-hmm.
practice it too. And, you know, there's this great book called The Invention of Women by Dr. Oyewumi, um, that I highly recommend everyone reading, because it
Mm.
talks about how feminism as a concept is new to Africa, or at least now, because the concept of women not being seen as equal or participants in all forms of leadership and strategy was so foreign to almost every African culture, because the understanding of women being the head of the church, of the home, and then also helping being the providers and creating
Mm.
that community, women's roles were largely exactly what we see in project management and CEOs and therapists and all these
Absolutely.
things that we see now in society, that all these people are making hundreds and thousands of dollars off, but yet mothers are still the most underpaid and underappreciated people in the
Mm.
home where the original church and priests were at, right?
Mm.
So if we can understand this, right, we look at how patriarchal, narcissistic religions absolutely hate women. They hate women. Like, there's no question about that, because the constant policing of a people, a specific set of people, only because they're of a certain gender,
The way
for
they were
you to
born.
control
Mm-hmm.
them, for the way they were born, yeah, for you to control them, to have a sense of power, authority, of purpose, is bullshit, because we all have free will. And we've talked about this before, how like a lot of civilizations that came into power, the only reason they came into power is because the one toxic man at the top told the rest of them that they would be able to have wives and children no matter how shitty they were, because they were guaranteed. So they
Mm-hmm.
could have any woman they want. They can build their army of children how they see fit, because they were guaranteed a woman. They were promised a woman. No matter if it meant killing her husband and giving her to you, you will have her.
Mm-hmm.
So go fight for me, go potentially die for me. But since we have the advantage, you'll come back not only a hero, but get rewarded with a
Yeah.
woman. And that's the first form of enslavement that we saw on this planet, the
Right.
enslavement of women, that then erase the emotional and mental health in men, where that projection became a cultural norm and rape
Mm.
culture and just authority and ego and narcissism that we've seen infected in every space, no matter how it starts off as, you know, like pretending to be all encompassing and wise and, you know, equitable, but still erasing women from even being seen as worthy voices in any religious space or any leadership
Mm-hmm.
space or any type
Mm-hmm.
of intellectual space. All of that is strategy, because at the end of the day, if your main purpose is to recruit the largest army who will work for you, and the immediate quote unquote treasure or prize that they can have is a woman, what better way then to build your army than to control women first and then provide for the army that will provide for you? And we've
Right. And
seen how that
just
happen.
right, absolutely. And just because we're not, let's say we're not in a war-driven, power-aggressive society like we were in those days, we have to understand that the power of aggression and colonialism is now veiled with capitalism. So
Yep.
when it comes to that, and consumerism, I should say, when it comes to that, absolutely nothing has changed. We men need to
Yep.
decide If you have babies, we need to decide if your boobs can be present, or how much or how long your skirt can be, or if yoga pants should be banned from U.S. college campuses because guys can't concentrate. We need to control that, because guess what? Sex sells. In a
Yep.
consumerism point of view, you're still the slaves, because we men advertise our products with your sexy bodies, with the allure of attracting more women. If you wear this Axe deodorant, women are literally going to burst through your walls and have sex with you, regardless of what a shitty person you are, except just
Yep.
because you're not fighting my wars like the old days. I'm making you the same deal, because by you giving me your money, you're still
Yep.
kind of fighting my war. I'm winning the spiritual
Exactly.
mental war. So women are still objectified and made as property, which is why we are still seeing a pushback. And like you said, in the ancient days, women not only could hold those positions, they could initiate divorces, they could own
Yep.
land, they could do anything a man could do in most of those settings. That did not change until we saw the spread of a new kind of patriarchy. And I like to
Yep.
bring up the rape of the Sabine women. I think I talked about this with you before, is
Yeah.
Rome, one of the greatest societies in Western. This is literally the epitome of Western expansion. And when it moved to a military conquest position, the way they started was a bunch of men, generals and their sons and warlords, came in possession of land by, of course, killing people. And then, but of course, since they were warriors, they had no women. So they sent out an invitation, and they planned to host these huge games and wanted women from all over the neighboring places to come. And they planned to trap these women in the Colosseum, kill their husbands and their sons, and then take these women as wives. And that's exactly what they did. Their first plan didn't go as planned, but they ended up getting the people there. They did it. So the first generation of Roman children were all rape children. Every
Ugh.
single one of them were born of rape. And this is exactly the deal you're talking about, is who the hell was the king of Rome? Well, we know who the brothers were, who can make the deal that, hey, all of you guys, I guarantee you all wives, and literally kidnap and like that happened. So when men are feeling untaxed unfairly because they are not guilty of the sins of their father, and they feel like women are giving them unwarranted heat, I would say I feel you. But at the same time, if you're fixing your lips to speak and say that there's no such thing as a patriarchy, you got to look at history. You got to look at the rape of the Sabine women and what kind of culture that instituted in Rome, which was the capital West. And that capital West, after the colonization of the Punic Wars, spread through Africa. And of course, as we know, the Templar Order, and then the European dynasties, and colonized up to America. This is all the same history. It began with the rape of women, and those same men organized themselves into a Senate, which was comprised of all old men. It is a patriarchy, unfortunately, and it's unfortunate that our Senate and our Congress still looks a lot like that. But before those days, we did not have that. You saw women pharaohs, you saw queens, rulers, architects, bosses. Like, people have to understand, and especially if you're into the Bible, I get it. The Bible and scholars like Paul say that women shouldn't speak in church, this and that. Those aren't the words of God. That is the word of Paul. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's one man. These are not the words of God's. And then finally on that, I'll say is that religion is still pretty new. The religions, I mean, the cultures that were matriarchal existed up to 2,000 years before Christianity, before Jesus Christ. So it's still a relatively new thing when you talk about that.
Yeah. All right, let's hit these bubbles.
Let's go.
Hit Bobby up.
So is there like a whole concept to where like government officials and like famous athletes get paid like sponsorship money or trademark money to say things? To like, you know, the whole thing, like the president and stuff says things like make America great again, but like he got sponsored to like AARP to say that, or even Joe Biden saying stuff. Like, is there like a whole money like concept thing to like with this type of stuff?
Good question.
If there's if there is a way, they'll do it. Like Goya bean, for example, was
Oh God.
100% something that they like. We all know what that is, so I don't even have to explain. But like there are certain ways that they'll try and do things. Like when you're in those type of positions, there are legislations in place that make it so that you're not supposed to be benefiting in any way. Because when you're in that type of hierarchical power position, the nepotism that can happen from contracts and just inviting in your inner circle to be part of that
Mm-hmm.
economic growth is dangerous. And so they have a lot of things in place. But for the most part, we see how they do a lot of backhand contracts or, like under the table shit in order to get that money to circulate back into their communities. So it's not even like they're outsourcing or putting that money into, the economy for the general public. They're giving those contracts out to the people who are like, somewhat
Buddies.
associated. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
buddies, like part of my golf club. So I know like later I can ask a favor. So
Mm-hmm.
you scratch my back, I scratch yours. Like they do it, but in the ways that there are loopholes for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And again, this is what we're talking about, the dangers of our version of corporatocracy slash capitalism that's different from a free market is uh, bribes are considered free speech, and when we have these lobbying groups, lobbying and think tanks go hand in hand, because think tanks will come together as a bunch of rich, privileged people and decide what norms and what things they want to see in society. And then through lobbyists, they'll get these things to be put into the political sphere. And of course, a lot of these guys own newspapers and media.
Yep.
So
Yep.
manipulating mass opinion and putting propaganda out is just part for the course. So this is a marriage of corporatocracy that we see. The government cannot, it is the government at this point. Let's be honest.
Yep.
It is the
Yep.
government at this point. We're living in a corporatocracy, and politicians, like the guy mentioned, his friend who's in Congress, I still absolutely believe that somebody can sign up to try to be a part of it, but really where the decisions are made, we're looking at huge corporate and huge conglomerate bodies that are controlling things.
Yep. It's like when you look at how a lot of people who are in politics, when they get out, they automatically they turn into lobbyists for
Mm-hmm.
different companies because they know the ins and outs of the legislation, how to pull the loopholes, and then how to worm in their
That's right.
contract, their lobbyist laws so that it benefits their company because that is literally their job to make
That's right.
sure that they're exempt from everything. And so when that happens, and like because corporations lobby to be seen as individuals, you couldn't even tax them or investigate them as you would as a public company or public property because
Right.
they're now categorized as an individual. So they have certain privacy rights, which is total bullshit.
Right.
But
Totally.
all of those things, those are all things that came into existence because the very people who wanted to evade the law that they created
Mm-hmm.
primarily to police the poor, to
Yep.
create and maintain the wealth gap, because when we look at the history of police, was created and maintained for the most powerful and rich at the expense and tolerance and abuse of everyone else. When we look at how the rich maintain that divide, oh my God, I lost my train of thought. Oh shit, my brain. What was
How,
I saying?
how the rich maintain that divide and use who have always been there to capitalize on poor people are now making themselves exempt from accountability.
Ah, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, being exempt from accountabilities, like you can literally look up, I think it was Exxon recently. Was it
Oh
Exxon?
God.
The
ExxonMobil.
lobbyists
Mm-hmm.
who literally said they knew what extent the damage would be for the climate at the hands of their product, and they didn't do jack shit because money was more important than human lives and the
Mm-hmm.
environment. And
Mm-hmm.
now we're literally at the point where all of the scientists are like, you know what? JK LOL, we all might actually die because what we need to do in order to get to a place where we survive has to happen now, expedited. And yet we're still seeing the same bullshit. Like,
Yeah.
like look at what's happening in the world. We borders don't exist in the air. The
Right.
fume and what we're doing to like erode the soil, uh, um, turn like bananas, for example, turn
Hmm.
our fruits and our veggies into only one strain in order to capitalize on it because we could sell it faster.
Yep.
Bananas are on the verge of being extinct because one thing to wipe it out, and they're all gone because they all have the same genetic makeup when they shouldn't. Like
Right.
the last
That has no
banana got extinct because
biodiversity.
of that. Yeah,
Hmm.
the bananas we have now was due to the fact that they were trying to figure out how to save the banana before it. That is how we are literally living in a world where we're on a knife's edge. And it just takes one thing for us to just split this world in half and cause chaos. And that thing is climate change. And we've seen how lobbyists who've
Oh
come
yeah.
largely from Republican parties, I don't know if we have lobbyists here in Canada. I feel like we do. Probably. I don't know.
I bet
I
you
didn't
do.
look into that. But
Yeah.
these people don't care. Money is their motivation. Their families are set. Why should they give a fuck about yours? It's literally a narcissistic nuclear family mentality.
Yeah. And just like you said, if you want to see where real controls relies, like for example, I don't care if you believe in climate change or not, right? The fact of the matter is that the rate of consumption and the way we're pimping out the environment, I don't care if it never made the temperatures hotter or whatever, blah 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 blah. You should still be against that. Like we're living
Yep.
in a world where the Native Americans told the Europeans in the 1700s, they're like, "Yo, the way you're hunting the buffalo and the way you're exploiting these crops, it's not going to be able to yield." And less than 10 years later, all of those croplands were no longer able to yield, and the buffalo was nearly extinct. And this is coming from a people that have been hunting and planting on this place for hundreds, if not 1,000 years. So when you talk
Oh
about,
man.
oh, well, this is the modern world, capitalism is so great, it provides, look at all the stuff we're able to create. These people were able to be here for thousands of years and support their population and not overdo it. You guys overdid it in less than a few, like less than 50 years. And that was when you didn't have these huge industrial complexes and these huge factories. And so, an example of where the power lies is when we say we need to stop certain things, lobbyists work against us. The political conversation gets toxic. If you believe in climate change, you're a sheep, idiot, this and that, this and that. When all of a sudden in America, when these rich corporate interests, these think tanks, these lobbyists, and these people said, yo, we need to make hemp illegal. Why did they make hemp illegal? Because it was threatening their petro slash oil businesses, because the plastics, you can make ropes, you can make so many materials for hemp.
Yep.
The wheat and the
Lumber,
marijuana
toilet
was from,
paper.
yeah, toilet paper, all these things, all kind of paper. Marijuana was consumed for mental health and
Yep.
regulation. All of this they did not want. So these powerful people were able to say that, and it became illegal. And poor and people of color received the brunt of the most brutal repression of that product ever. Not because it's dangerous, because literally it's legal now, and white people and states are making tons of money and taxes off of it. It's all fine and good now. People are still rotting in jail from selling it when it was illegal. This is the word of a corporation. Let's talk about sugar. Sugar, of course, is one of the primary founding slave trades of America. It's one of the cash crops of America. A few corporations and a few elite people said, hey, all of a sudden, let's do high fructose corn syrup because it's cheaper. We can make more money. And in less than 15 years, almost all the products that had original sugar now have fructose corn syrup. Like, they can make changes this quickly because they control a lot of the propaganda, the think tanks, and the lobbyists. If they don't want something to change, they're going to fight it like hell. So we're seeing them fight like hell to keep control over these resources. But when they want to change something, we see how quickly they put their money behind it and make it happen. But
Yep.
they're illustrating who the enemy is and how they work. And we just have to wisen up and stop wanting to live in this convenience, in this consumer convenience, and let them do whatever they want, you know?
And 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 exactly that last part, because when we look at our world today, we are literally distracting ourselves with all of these quote unquote luxuries and joys that
Mm,
routinely, like you said earlier on in this conversation, was a mimic of luxury that was in the elite circles. Because
yes.
these people had so much money and so much lack of motivation or community building that they had to create ways to keep their minds off of all of the other things, their own insecurities, what the people are saying and what they're doing, et cetera, just so they can drown out the noise of their own minds and the noise of the
Hmm.
people who are starving and dying in their society. And now
Hmm.
we're doing the exact same thing, but like I said, at a
Hmm.
global level, where we're all like, very like I'm a privileged woman, like
Hmm.
as much as I'm also an oppressed woman, I'm a privileged woman. I recognize that
Right.
because I'm living in a country where I have access to those luxuries. Meanwhile, there are people who are literally getting murdered in Palestine because
Hmm.
of a form of imperialism that is
Right.
backed by the United States. And like, we live in this reality, but we feel so disassociated from it because we're constantly coping with the luxuries of like Netflix or, the ability to watch
PlayStation,
all of
football.
these
It keeps
things.
going.
But like all of those things, like it plays a part in how our own discipline and mindfulness of what it actually means to be a human on this planet and to be part of a global community that we've erased from our understanding of self and understanding of humanity. Because,
Mm,
like you were saying earlier, we've been living in race theory because race theory was created by Europeans to
say it.
dictate and say that they were literally superior to everyone else on the planet because not only were they the image of God, but God told them
Hmm.
that they were allowed to come in and enslave the people around them. Total bullshit, as
Manifest
we know, the
destiny.
weaponization of religion. Yeah,
Hmm.
but all of these things. And so, if the whole point of us to get to the expansion and the awareness and the mindfulness and unlearning of what is incorrect in our society is to be critical, why would we not be critical of race theory to have critical race theory?
Right. Right. See, you just brought up hella stuff I want to comment. Let's hit these ditties. Like me and you can literally bounce off each other forever. Let's
Yeah.
go. We got Mars the Black, my boy, my IRL boy.
Sup, homie?
What's it doing?
Man, shout out to this fire ass panel, spitting
Man.
all the truth that there is to spit. I would expect nothing less of my best friend up there, Freedom Rain.
Hey, hey,
So,
hey.
and all the isms, I've listened to a lot of your shows, and I
Yo.
Oh,
just like really appreciate all the content you guys are providing. Like, it's really refreshing to finally hear like something cool. So, yeah, like I
that's so
Appreciate
said,
you.
I
sweet.
would not expect nothing less from. Oh, that's my best friend. Oh, that's my best friend. Oh, black in the building. Hey,
Hey, I
East
love
Oakland.
it. That's my best friend.
Black in the building. Yo, Mars. I've been hearing all them isms all up in these streets too. We ended up on a panel together and we were having great dialogue with E. Ruth and Kevin Morris.
Yeah.
And shout out to them for creating that space in that panel. But then I started going off on a tangent, and a lot of the hosts and other panel members were disagreeing with me, and I was like, oh shit, all them isms is not gonna like me, yo. And then she spoke and she started spitting some fire on some shit that I was like, what the hell? So yeah, it's like the meeting of the minds right now because me and her are on the same hype as you can see. I was hella surprised, like, yo, she's going off.
Same
So
wavelength.
I'm honored. Yes, I'm honored. All right,
Same,
who we
same,
got?
same.
Scotty. Scotty.
Scotty.
What's up, Juan?
For the isms, real quick, I just wanted to let you know the people have spoken and they nominated you as Miss Intellectual and Miss
What?
Congeniality.
Oh,
Hopefully,
dead.
we see you
Ooh.
tomorrow at the Stereo Miss Queens of Stereo Awards. You feel me?
Oh my
Oh,
God.
damn.
Or if not, I just wanted to let you know your peers definitely see you, man. I mean, a little bit of acknowledgement go a long way. Shout out to all the isms, Freedom Reign, big love to y'all, though.
Shout out,
Holy
Zadi.
smokes, dead. Sorry, man.
Yo.
I'm actually so surprised because I haven't been on stereo in a while now.
You
I've been
haven't.
like juggling. I started a company over here. I do a lot of equity, inclusion, and diversity work. And like
Hmm.
I didn't like, I started and I'm like, yeah, this will be like something I want to do. And then it's like starting to pick up speed. I'm like, oh, JKLOL, I need to like really start learning small business stuff. But yeah, I've been busy over here. But oh my God, I've never had this happen before, so
Miss
I don't know what to
Intellectual.
do.
You better start preparing your speech, girl. I'm
Oh my
voting.
God.
I'm
Thank you.
voting.
Thank you.
Yeah, now, yeah, now. Oh my God! All right. All of a sudden, I didn't know. I thought I was just on here with a fellow intellectual. Apparently, I'm on the line on the panel with a queen
Oh
of
my
stereo.
God.
Okay, shit. All right.
Y'all making me blush. I can't.
All right,
Oh
we
my God.
showing up for that G thing tomorrow. I think he said it's tomorrow. I'm gonna check out Dottie's his schedule and see when the Queens of Stereo show is. That's
True, true,
what's
true.
up.
Yeah, I'll check it out too.
Look, and you
Damn,
ain't been on
that's
in a
okay.
minute, but people just remember where you was at. People remember you left an impression. Your intellect. Okay.
Damn. I'm very grateful, everyone. Like I really am. I know I have like a lot of shit to say. I know it. I know friends are always like, you should make a podcast. Like, you're just like spitting bare facts. I'm like, honestly, half the time I feel like I'm like super anarchist, revolutionary type of mindset. And I'm like, will people get it? But I'm really grateful because like as I was telling a lot of people, it was really great to find stand up as a community because
Hmm.
so many people I've met on this platform, I'm just blown away, like yourself. I
Oh,
I have thankfully some people in my like immediate life where I can have these conversations, but like the overall community, it's nice to find people who I can have these conversations with. So yeah,
yeah.
I appreciate
Especially
you.
after. I appreciate you too, and like. I love how on stereo game recognized game. There's certain people like the first couple of times I heard you speak, and just other people. It's like you know,
Yeah,
the world may not
you
know,
pick
but
up on it.
you pick up on it definitely. And so as far as what you're saying about being an anarchist, I think what a lot of people have they don't want to let go of capitalism or this two-party system that we have because they like what are we going to replace it with. But I think
Yeah,
people have this impression that our anarchy means that we're going to blow up all the federal buildings, kill all the politicians, and just start over from scratch. That's absolutely not true. If America has some great systems that have been evolving over time and that a lot of our ancestors have put time into amending and reforming, there's totally things we can keep.
yes,
Anarchy or just that just means not being afraid to throw shit out. So
yep.
keep what you want to keep for sure, but we're not keeping stuff like we're letting go of this. Oh, we must protect the elite people at the top of the pyramid because they said if I'm a good little boy, I can be just like them and take advantage of people underneath me.
Oh
Like
my God, you need to do.
we need to get rid of that mentality, yo. On the real. So
Oh,
yeah,
so
I
facts
appreciate
though. Literally so facts.
I appreciate your outlook. Let's hit these last two ditties and then we can get back into it.
Yeet.
All right. Copper Goddess.
Hello.
Grand evening, freedom
Grand
reign, and
evening.
all them isms, the
Right?
dynamic duo of stereo. I have
Man.
missed the two of you's content.
Aw.
That's what's up. I need this energy that you all bring forth. I'm listening and learning as usual with the both of you. The
Oh, I love
commentary
you.
is always on point, and you guys seem like the best newscasters ever.
Oh my God.
It's good to hear from the both of you. Enjoy your
Appreciate
show, and I hope it's a great one. But I
Oh,
know it's
thank
going to be.
you.
it.
Hope, nope.
Thank
Aw.
you. Oh, I appreciate the love. Do. This is the 10:30 newscast with all them isms and freedom.
For reals, yeah. This is gonna be an ongoing show because we just spit like she's Oh my God. I rarely meet people who are better than me. And Copper Goddess, every time you slide through, you always showing love and support. Really respect you. I love
Yes,
hearing your content. Thanks so much for sticking through. And yeah,
we out here.
we out here. All right. My IRLBF is my boy, the Black.
Yeah, man. I think your first show you did with that I heard that I was listening to was you did a show with my friend Spirit Love, and
That's right.
then I was also tuned in for your critical race theory show you had like a while back. But yeah, man. I think it's only fitting that you do a show with my boy Freedom Rain here when
Hey.
two massive intellects collide. So yeah, man.
Yee.
Shout out to y'all, man. Black in the building, cunt gang in this thing. Hey.
Ding, ding, ding. I love it. I
In
appreciate
this
all
thing.
the love. Oh my God.
Yeah, absolutely. Because me and her, sometimes we go off on a tangent on some deep shit. And I know that based on the conversations that are happening in the public corporate mainstream media, I know some people are triggered. I know some people come on, and as soon as we start really digging deep into shit people don't want to talk about, people are like, must swipe to protect my own sense of self-importance. You know what I mean? So,
Literally, oh my God, do voiceovers.
oh yeah. And me and her got some ideas cooking. She gave me this great ass idea of the Republican and the Democrat Party. And there's an American citizen in this room, and they're trying to get him to give away his power and his rights and give into the two-party system, but they're playing good cop, bad cop. So
Yes,
she's got a lot of ideas, and I
we
can
gonna
pretty
do
much
it.
do any male voice, but I can't do women's voice. So expect some collaborations coming out on that too.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Absolutely. Okay, so I had a question for you.
Yes.
How
See.
was when in the social political climate that we were very familiar with in America in 2020, with what the Proud Boys and Black Lives Matter versus vaccine versus anti-vax and all these things that were on corporate mainstream media during the quarantine and lockdown, how was it for you in Canada?
Like in terms of how we saw it going down in America or how it was happening here for us?
Both.
Ooh, okay. I'll answer with how it was happening with us first, and then I'll
Yeah.
talk about our perception of what was
Yeah.
happening in the States.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, it's actually really funny. So I work for
Uh-oh, you turned into Star Wars radio again. This happened on our last talk. Sometimes for y'all who are Star Wars fans, you know how the Rebel Alliance used to talk on their Red 5 standing by. She be doing that sometimes. Let's see if she's back. No, you're still Rebel Alliance.
Damn.
There you go. You're back. You left the
I'm
X-Wing.
back? Okay. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
So it's okay, it's not funny, I guess, but it's coinciding that we're having this conversation. You asked me that. So for myself, my roommate at the time, we were always heavily invested in a lot of geopolitical, global environmentalism and political information.
Mm-hmm.
So we're always like, granted, you can't know everything and like, for your own mental health, but we're always very much up on like conversation. So amongst our friend group, we do have a lot of these conversations. And so her boyfriend at the time, he had back in China, and he was telling us like, yo, some stuff is happening. Like it's really weird how they're reacting to it. Like this looks like it's going to be something big. And so we were having this conversation of like what, the flu was. So back then we didn't know it was coronavirus. So it was like this mystery flu. We were having a conversation about that, at least in my household, like as early as December of 2019.
Yeah.
And like that's when we started to kind of get a little more information, like we were starting to hear about something happening in China. And so our conversation was really around that, and like it kind of expanded to our gym. But everything that really kind of hit the fan in March, I believe it was March 17th for us when we went into lockdown across Canada. And it was really scary because I know, so because my household, we were already talking about it. We were already kind of prepared. Like, um,
Toilet
we know
paper?
how people we know how people react under pressure and especially in crisis. So we already stocked up on like certain canned things, non-perishables, things like that. But the day before everything was gonna lock down, I was at the gym with my roommate and we could see from the gym because it's right beside a grocery store a lineup of just people with carts packed with just so much food and toilet paper
Yeah.
that it literally felt like I assume this is what people kind of see when they're on the tornado belt where they're prepping for tornadoes or a
Mm,
flood. I've never seen that. Like I've
hmm.
never had to be in that position of seeing people scared about resources because something big was about to happen. And so, like, I feel like a lot of people felt that way because going into the grocery store afterwards, you can see the confusion on people's faces on how, like everyone was pretty much like super on their toes of, will this be the last time we can go outside for a very long time? Like, how bad is this? Are we going to drop dead like we're seeing in these videos? And so in Canada, um, it was that huge panic and that huge like moment of fear. But this is where caremongering, I don't know if you've heard of caremongering out in the States.
Oh, I never heard of that.
Caremongering
Your mic
started
did
in
the thing again.
Toronto. Oh no, is it? La, la,
Yeah.
la, 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 almost broke.
I
I'm trying to
don't
see,
know
but
why it
I'm
does
like
that every once
filling in the space to see. Once the tunnel of doom is gone, I'll like keep talking. You know what? Let's play this message and then
Okay.
I'll continue talking.
Good idea. Okay.
Overthinker.
Overthinker. What's up, bro?
Hey guys,
He's gonna
good
be honest.
content. I just want to chime in and share my experience as well in the early days. So I was working at a company, and when things started happening around February, late February, they put together a task force for how to respond and whatnot. And I look back and I'm kind of in awe of how they were not able to understand or accept what was happening. And, because they're talking about, oh, well, we have hand sanitizer stations around the office and this and that. And I had to come in and literally say, guys, we're not going to be here in a couple weeks.
Right.
They're not going to let us in the building. No one's going to be able to go anywhere. We have to prepare for everyone going fully remote. And that was completely like shocking and jarring for them to hear.
Yeah. He's got one more.
Yeah.
Sorry, just last point. So I just look back and I'm like in shock of how people were totally psychologically unprepared for this. And I guess my mind was able to go somewhere, unbelievable or crazy faster than everyone else. But yeah, I had to actually kind of really talk them through the realization of what was happening, and saying, guys, that they're going to shut down the office and this and that. You just have to get ready. So, yeah, it's crazy to look back. It wasn't that long ago, but it was so long ago. It's one of those
Right?
things. But yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
And you know what? I feel like a lot of people who I don't want to like depict anything, but definitely if you've gone through some sort of trauma, like your healing process has put you in a position where like you can kind of really recognize reality and fantasy. And so when everything, am I still in the tunnel of doom, by the way?
You flickered in and out, but you're good right now.
Oh, okay. But the whole thing of like people not being prepared and like the whole fear mongering and kind of like this delusion of like it's not that bad, like we're good, we don't need to prepare, like it just looks bad because it's over there, like people always like that whole mentality of like we're the West, we're the best, like that whole mentality. And so like with how I was saying caremongering arose because two women in Toronto, Valentina and Mita, they You know, they do a lot of community work, and they saw what was happening, that a lot of people were really scared about what their next steps were going to be. Like, you know, people were losing their jobs, people couldn't pay their bills, some people didn't have food to feed their families, like it was chaos. And so they created this Facebook group called Caremongering to kind of provide for people like a space where they can ask their greater community for assistance. And that took off. One was like created in Waterloo, which is the one I help. Like a week later, like the Waterloo group has almost 8,000 people. The Toronto group has 30,000 people, or it might be 25 now. But because of that movement, the two of them started, it went all across Canada. Like I've talked with so many different administrators of those Facebook groups from different provinces. And then it spread to the United States, it spread to India. Now there's over 264, I believe, different caremongering groups across the globe where people have risen up within their communities to help facilitate these resources for the people who either lost their jobs, you know, maybe they're part of the groups who have always been underserved and now in the pandemic are even more underserved because of the erasure of who was seen as needed immediate help and who didn't. And like it just, I think for us in Canada, because of things like that, because it went really fast, like I think within 2 or 3 weeks of the first one happening in Toronto, it was across Canada and people were already 100% behind, you know, like if you need food, let me know. One of the things that we did was people who were high risk or immune compromised, if they needed groceries, they could post in the group. Someone would go buy their groceries for them and deliver it to them where they were at. And then they would just pay the person who went to get it for them. Or some people, if they didn't have the money for the groceries that week, someone will go do everything for them and just drop it off for them. All of those things happened within the first 2 weeks of the pandemic. All of those things happened
And can I
because
say,
of fear-mongering.
exactly, caremongering. And can I say that it's just so amazing that this is an initiative started by people. People where the rubber meets the road, using their
Yes.
resources, and they mobilized something that gave immediate relief and result. At the same time, these people were doing this, our government and our corporate news media was
Floundering.
squandering, and they were sending us texts about, oh, police brutality, black people, you're treated unfairly. Oh, white people, you're being censored. They're over here trying to stir up fights between
Yep.
us, and already cause dynamics while people are solving their own problems. So I think
Yeah.
it just speaks a lot of, and in America, we had that same thing where at first it started off as like caremongering towards the essential workers and taking care of the elderly. But then again, with American, well, not just American, but in the capitalist consumerism of the West, it became co-opted and it became virtue
Yes.
signaling. Virtue
Yes.
signaling is where all these rich corporations who never gave a shit about people would put out a statement like, we stand with black people in real life, blah, 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 blah. The NFL, the same people who blacklisted and fired Colin Kaepernick for peacefully taking a knee on the same issues that the country was divided on in 2020, they sent out this thing, we stand with the black community, blah, blah, blah.
Yes. Oh
And do
my
you
God, I
know,
saw that.
it was so entertaining to read the comments, yo. They had like only a few hundred likes, but they had like 30,000 comments of people ripping them, and it
Roasting
felt
them.
so good to hear. I was like, yeah, dude. So virtue
Yes.
signaling and fake representation flew off the handle in the US, but
I
and
call
then
that corporate woke washing.
oh, that is the perfect term, and that's exactly what it was. And while we the people are saying, hey, support and say thank you, take care of your essential workers, the right and left wing corporate news media is creating a war, a war in people's psyche that essential workers are for the first time being attacked, cussed out, and fought
Oh my
on
God,
because of
yeah.
mask mandates. And that shit went everywhere. So like literally a week later, we were telling, oh, take care of your essential workers. And now we're cussing them out, and making their jobs a living hell because their corporate masters are making them enforce policies You know, it's just like it was
Um,
absolute
ooh,
turnaround.
I have a story about that because I
Oh,
was I
God.
was there when that happened.
Yeah.
So, as everyone knew, when the pandemic started, like literally price gouging in so many ways became the most prominent reason why resources weren't being distributed as they should.
Right.
And a lot of that temper was put on frontline workers, specifically in grocery stores or convenience stores, things like that, where people were buying everyday supplies because other people were buying up large amounts of toilet paper and sanitizer and this and that and trying to sell
Right.
it for such like $80 a sanitizer bottle, like all of these ridiculous prices just to make a quick buck on people's pain. And so where I
Mm-hmm.
live, there is this convenience store that is family owned, and because of what's happening in the market, they have to rise their prices because then they'd be losing money because of what's happening, how their shipments are now being delayed, and like
Mm-hmm.
the competition to get things. And so I think they raised their sanitizer maybe like $2. Like it
Oh
wasn't
my
even
God.
that bad. It wasn't even that bad. Like
Mm.
I think like a 751 ml bottle was like $6-7.
That's not that
Whatever.
bad. Mm-hmm.
You found a bottle. Some people don't even have that. And so this woman, oh my God, like honestly, like people literally tell me that if I was like, way back in the day, I would 100% have like a broadsword strapped to my back because I would be that person going around upholding justice and shit. But anyway, so me and my friend, we went to the dollar store because we needed to get some stuff. And so I'm holding two packs of tinfoil in each hand, or like a pack of tinfoil in each hand, and all I hear from like outside at the cashier is, "Why is this so expensive?" And automatically my ears perked up because I'm like, I already know this tone. Some entitled bullshit's gonna be coming in
This
here.
is the let
So
me talk to your manager tone.
yes, it is. And so I'm like, let me listen in. Let me just listen in.
Ooh.
So this woman is going off. She's just like, you people are so despicable, blah, 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 blah. How could you do this to us? Blah, like it shouldn't be this expensive. I came here to get this. Like, I shouldn't have to pay this. I want to pay the original
I.
price of this, and
Mm-hmm.
this. And I'm just like, I'm like, oh hell nah. Oh hell nah. You are not going to be pulling this card while I'm in this store. So I walk out casually with my tinfoils in my hand and I'm like, hello. Yes, capitalism is a bitch. The price
Mm.
gouging of this world is terrible. But you know whose fault that is? The capitalists. These people who are stocking the shelves and who are the cashier are not the problem. They don't
Right.
set the price. They literally don't do anything revolving around the budget of the store. So why are you yelling at people just because you're mad at their boss? That is so disrespectful. If you want the sanitizer, buy it. If you don't, leave it. But at the end of the day, it's not their problem. And this woman was like looking at me, oh my God, in such shock, and then goes into this whole tirade of like, they shouldn't put up the prices. You know what? Fuck you. Fuck you. And then
Yo.
throws the sanitizer at me, storms to the door, turns back around, looks at me, points at me again, and she's like, fuck you. I'm never coming back to this store. And I'm like, all right, cool. I don't work here, but sure. I'm sure they would
Mhm.
appreciate it. Bye. And she left. And you know what the most terrible thing of that scenario was? The
What?
fact that the cashier had to say, can you stay for the rest of the day? Meaning that wasn't the first damn person who was doing that shit to her.
Oh
And I
no.
got so mad. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? How
Well,
bloody entitled do you have to be to think that we're not all friggin' suffering right now? Granted,
period.
the people who are privileged are not, but we are all suffering right now. Why are you making enemies where it doesn't require that?
Right. And these are the people who are seeing They're feeling the wear and tear on the bottom of that pyramid we talked about. These are
Yes.
poor and common people serving at a job, poor and common people for a paycheck. And I'm not about like hate the rich, tax the rich, eat the rich. Of course, corporations are not people and they shouldn't be viewed as people. There's things in capitalism that are making it a corporatocracy that is not a free market. But again,
Yeah.
like you said, Jeff Bezos, he's not tripping off the price of sanitizer. The big wigs at the Federal Reserve, all these places who dictate these prices and inflation are living cool. So as we're talking about critical thinking, it's really important to see that we were manipulated into making everybody else our enemy by the mainstream media. Say it was on purpose or not, but literally, attack the cashier, attack the workers if they are telling you to wear a mask, attack them if the price goes up, attack Black people if they're talking about their grievances and the issues they face in America, censor and attack white people just because they're guilty of their father's sins, attack women because they're asking for things now and apparently they want a voice, attack, and we just took it.
Yeah.
It was just
Shifting the blame.
attack.
Shifting the blame, always.
Shifting the blame. Well, because again, here we are, we're about to go through this thing. Earlier, we talked about how America, through the legacy of Rome, has found a way to commoditize entertainment and give it to us common people as a luxury that they experience to keep us from focusing on the problems and the people around us. So in 2020, when they know we'd be locked down, when Americans wouldn't have their football, oh God, Americans don't have their football and their baseball, and all these entertainment centers are off, people are at home. They needed to fill up our mind with a bunch of narratives, stories, and things to make us feel some type of way. Because God forbid that we have that time to critical think, focus on our mental health, and take care of ourselves and our families. No, we need to be spinning our wheels in the mud, mad at everybody else and pointing the finger. So they made the corporate news media. If we just look back in 2020 and see all the things they were putting in the news cycle, it's actually disgusting that they were fear mongering the whole step of the way, while people like the caremongers were trying to come together and make sure resources got out. This is what our most rich corporations were doing, was trying to turn us against each other, just so they could virtue signal a month later and say they stand with us, so that when Christmas rolled around, we'd still spend our money with them.
Yes.
Out of pocket.
Yes.
We got some dings in the chamber. Go ahead.
Everything now is about the bottom dollar. Like everything is co-opted for the bottom dollar. Wokeism and this is why I said like woke washing. You had like in June pride washing, where every company switched their logo to the pride flag and then literally on July 1st switched right back. Like there's so many things that are being co-opted because they recognize the revenue stream within it. Yeah, authenticity. The trend now, which shouldn't be a trend at all, but the trend now is that authenticity sells. And to corporate, authenticity is washing whatever their corporate image is with whatever movement is happening. So like Black Lives Matter washing, Me Too washing, but it's all just a form of deflection and adaptation to rebrand the colonial mindset into those advocacy groups. And that's why things like identity, gender identity is political when it's like, it's not.
It's not
People are literally only trying to be seen as human to get their rights that they rightly deserve so that they're not exploited or murdered. Something that we all wish to not happen to us, and yet the goalpost always shifts because it's still a form of control for people in power. And so when we see corporations,
it's a great talking point too.
Exactly. And so this comes back into the whole fact of like saviorism and the savior complex, the hero complex, and how, especially when it comes to intellectual property and knowledge, white is right. And we always see that, especially in academic spaces, where the inclusivity that's required, the other narratives that are not European centric, they're always seen as lesser than, only because the academic space is still gatekept by those mentalities. And like it's everywhere, right? And so oh man, I lost my train of thought again. Sorry, what were we saying? the like what's the encapsulation of this? We were talking
We
about
were talking
washing,
about
woke
how,
washing.
yeah, woke washing, and
Yeah.
how it's being capitalized on in a commercial way to really for that bottom line of the dollar. And it actually hurts the people that you're woke washing. For example, when you're putting Black trans people all over television, when Black trans people, sure, they have it hard, but Black trans people
Societally.
are a small percentage of the overall trans community. And the trans community is a small percentage of the overall LGBTQ community. But when you purposely put that face all over, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get people to associate this with that person. And what
Yep.
that does is it creates a backlash because
Yep. It creates a
heterosexual and
target.
exactly. Now, the Black trans person who's already the target of more violence is now associated with, oh, the gay agenda being pushed on us by the corporations.
Yes.
So now a Black trans person might even be more of a target by somebody who doesn't like them because their face is being plastered all over things with virtue signaling, not even for an authentic reason. So
Yes,
it's a
100%. And
right.
that leads into the appropriation of those spaces when,
Yep.
and this is why intersectionality and intersectional lens, intersectionality matters. This is a plug. Intersectionality Matters by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw, who coined the term. That is a podcast. It's on Apple Podcasts. You can look it up if you look up Intersectionality Matters by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. But anyways, huge way to learn about intersectionality if you're unsure of what it is. I just don't want to go too deep into it in the audience, but
Yeah.
definitely listen to that. But this is why intersectional lens is so important because like I have this conversation with one of my friends where we're talking about, like the LGBTQ community and how we're talking about representation and advocacy, and largely the work is still put on the backs of people of the global majority who are in the LGBTQ community to be the grassroots movement. But then when it comes to the face of all the positivity and the impact, you always see that it's a white LGBTQ person in that space. And it erases the reality of how that movement came to be, who suffered at the hands of it, and recognizing the colonial mindset that still benefits a select people, even within that oppressed group. And so all of these things, we see companies who are very half-assing it in their ESGs or their diversity and inclusion work cultures, or what they're trying to create in their companies. It's still from the mindset of like, all right, we want to still, keep our ROI, but seem like we're inclusive. And it's like, it's a PR move at the end of the day. And this is why I said that book Propaganda by, public relations daddy Edwards Bernays. Like, information is power, knowledge is power. Learning strategy and how things are fed to us is power. You get to recognize and you start to see what you are continuously conditioned to internalize repeatedly because you're consistently bombarded with the same image across a spectrum of different ways of saying it, different ways of seeing it, different ways of implementing it, but all at the same day, the same shade of devil. And so it's all coming for your money, the ROI, that at the end of the day, you are the product that they dig the most into in order to reap the most benefit. And so when we're thinking about advocacy work, when we're thinking about inclusion, diversity, when we're thinking about things like caremongering and how that, if you are in this audience and you have heard of caremongering from a company, this is how crazy this evolution is. I work directly with the women who started that movement. If you live somewhere on this world and you've heard a corporation use caremongering, it's because they co-opted the grassroots movement of 2 women of color, which is the very strategy of every company that goes into these spaces without the mindfulness of the inclusion and uplifting the voices of the people already doing the work. They're not coming in with that mentality. So they're erasing these people to then come in and say, we care, we're doing this. We did an EDI workshop. Yeah. We had Jane Elliott. Oh, actually, no, I'm not going to roast Jane Elliott. She's a G. That's the first name that came to my brain, though. But we have Karen McNeil, the EDI specialist. And, not to knock Karen, but we have Karen McNeil, who came in to teach us about, racism and how racism is doing X, Y, and Z in the workforce, but is unable to speak on microaggressions or recognize where she's being microaggressive as an educator of DEI. And that's the biggest problem. And then again, people of color, women of color, especially Black women, are put in a position where they both have to be the educator and the shield for everyone, because then they get blamed for quote unquote being aggressive when someone is here trying to teach us so that you don't have to. And it's like, if I consistently have to correct you, I'm the one teaching. Pay me then.
Right. Absolutely. Everything you said was straight lace. My phone went out for a second, but it came back right when you were still spitting that fire. Let's hit some of these ditties.
Oh, damn. I didn't even see all the bubbles. Shit.
Oh, my God.
I got heated.
Right.
Straight up.
Eva Shea in the building. Talk to us, Eva
Hello.
Shea. Oh, it won't let me
I gotta
push
drink
it.
some juice.
Can you do it? It won't let
parched.
me.
Yes, I'll do it.
Okay.
It's probably because your phone glitched.
What's up, Freedom Rain and all them isms? Y'all are speaking some facts. Remember when COVID first happened and like every commercial had like some piano music and then some family and then like some, oh, we're all in this together shit from every major corporation. Or when Black Lives Matter started hitting, like every corporation wanted to start putting Black people in their commercials, smiling and shit.
Oh my God.
It's so whack.
Oh my God, yes. The blatancy of that strategy. Everyone saw through that shit, except the people who are so blindsided by their saviorism in that space. Oh my God. Yes.
Hey, and just that damn piano music, and I'm sorry, as a teacher, I was personally irked every time they included, we're all in it, and then they show a teacher teaching students through Zoom. Like, look, I know it was a reality. I taught my students through Zoom, but you paying somebody to put on a mask and teach to a fake class in Zoom, like, you got me fucked up. Like, that, it irks my nerve when I saw all this virtue signaling. Oh, Black people, and then especially after the Black Panther movie dropped, is now we know Black people have universal appeal. They're marketable. We can make money. So when their issues are being talked about on the news, all of a sudden we're going to stick some Black people in our commercials. We're going to stick some, body shaming is bad, plus women are being, okay, let's stick a big woman in there. Oh my God. Like Facebook, I'm sorry, Facebook was under a lot of scrutiny from all of the political stuff they were doing. So they were releasing some of the most woke commercials to the point it made me sick. Like, they have the Black trans guy roller skating around with the plus size girl. Then they have literally they fit every single group. And then when a lot of violence towards Asians was going on in America, now they got the token Asian. I was like, guys, it doesn't feel good to any of us groups going through that shit. It only feels good to, like you said, the saviors and the virtue signaling people. And it only makes other people, like, unfortunately, the white heterosexual male, who I'm not at all like, oh, let's coddle him. But at the same time, you're doing that to upset and make him feel some type of way, while at the same time you're using my image to exploit. Like, it was just so sickening, the virtue signal happening in 2020.
Well, that space is always largely predicated on performance, right? In every single way. And the psychology behind performance signaling is that when you know the whole thing of like thinking you did something.
You're in the tunnel.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, the tunnel of doom. All right, let's play a bubble. I'm gonna play a bubble.
Okay. Bjorn.
I was just looking at an article back in April of 2020 where New York State paid 20 cents for gloves that normally cost a nickel, and $7.50 for each mask, about 15 times the usual price. They paid $248,000 for a portable X-ray machine that typically sold for $30,000.
Wow. I'm telling you.
Yeah, while we were suffering, some people were making big bucks.
Dude, what's that one congresswoman or Senate woman who literally, when they were making the decision to tell the public about what's going to happen with the next couple weeks because of this virus, literally bought stocks in body bags?
I heard about that.
Wicked. I can't. Wicked.
That is wicked. All right, we got Spirit Love in the chamber. What's up, Spirit?
Hey, Free Regine. Hey, ALLTHEMISMs. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good, doing good. This, I'm glad y'all are open to us and hearing us speak on these topics and not tone policing us. Because if you come in, we might sound mad, but we're not. We're just going off on.
We hate it. Passionate.
Yeah, we're going off. She's in the tunnel of doom right now, which is why she sounds like she's on a Star Wars X-wing radio comm. But dun, 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 dun. Red 5 standing by. All right, that's no moon. But she'll be back soon. Her phone never does that every once in a while. How you doing, Spirit Love? Talk to us.
Can this queer man of diversity please come on this chat for a little bit?
You said what?
Kenneth Squareman.
I don't know who that is.
Kenneth
Squareman. All right, we got Bjorn in the building. Let's go.
How do you think you balance the, practically, I don't know where you all are in your lives, but, in the workplace or in your school, you often have, is the places where you try to have, anti-racist or pro-equity things happen. And typically what happens is, the admin will be like, oh, let's find the token whatever person. So you have tokenism, or other people have termed that the minority tax, where most of the work being done to do anti-racist work is foisted upon the underrepresented minorities. And how do we shift that so that they don't feel like they have to do all the work, but also getting white folk to do more of the work?
Yo,
there's no easy answer to that. Obviously, it's very
dope
spectrum.
question too. Yeah.
Yes, great question. It's very layered. From my work in this space, it really depends on the work culture, the people who are there. Once you meet them and you see their willingness and openness to be uncomfortable in these conversations, because when we're talking about anti-race or anti-blackness,
shake your phone.
Shake my phone.
Shake it. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but you're still in the tunnel. But go.
Am I in the tunnel now?
Yeah, you still are. We can make it out. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Say it again.
Am I in the tunnel of doom?
Yeah, you're still there. But go ahead. I know. We're gonna invest in you a nice little headset, a nice little headpiece. Keep going.
Wait, I wonder if I was to put on my headphones if that would work. But okay, I'll just continue. What was I saying? Anti-racism. There you go. When it comes to decentering the emotional labor of people of the global majority and centering the requirement and the discomfort of white allies, when that happens, then that type of reality can flourish. Because until discomfort of white allies is centered in the sense of you need to feel that, recognize that, realize the root of that, and then own it instead of projecting it onto people of color through tone policing, through saviorism, through correcting, gatekeeping, whatever form of projection or denial, until people who are of the global minority, and by the way, I'm saying these to replace the terminology of Black, Indigenous, people of color, BIPOC. I know there's a spectrum of how people receive it, but there's a new term that's kind of going around that I've been changing my language around, called people of the global majority to represent BIPOC, and then people of the global minority to represent people who are not BIPOC. So when you hear me say that, that's what I'm referencing, by the way. Until people of the global minority, so white people, especially in the ally space, can sit with that discomfort of, being faced with anger, because it doesn't matter if you're coming in with, care and kindness and trying to change the world. That is a version of the savior complex that put us in this space to begin with. The reality is you need to recognize where you need to sit down, listen, and be told what to do, and then go do it. You're not a leader in that space. You're not someone coming in with, change and innovation, because these conversations have largely been spoken about for generations by people of the global majority, by people at the grassroots movements, by people who've been in these type of spaces and advocating for this type of recognition. This conversation is not new. It's just a broken record that's continuously skipping the part where the change happens. And so until we can center and sit in that discomfort and allow people of the global majority to express themselves, no matter how uncomfortable it makes you, so that their body is no longer holding that trauma, there will not be any work culture that will be inclusive, because it's still requiring people of the global majority to enter structures built by white supremacy and change it from the inside out. And that's not how it should be. It should be the bones of that structure either get a calcium upgrade and get stronger through inclusivity by becoming better, by doing better, or we tear it completely down. But at the end of the day, it still requires something to change at the hands of the foundation, instead of assuming that the people coming into it need to conform or adapt so that you remain comfortable while everyone else has to tolerate.
Right.
And that's not, and I know that's very general, and obviously there's different strategies, there's different things that you can do, environmental scans, different implementations to see how the data then is conceptualized through the actions and behaviors, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, if someone is unwilling or not intentional in actively changing for the betterment of the people around them, they're not going to do it, no matter what you invest into it.
Yeah, and my answer would be the same. It's especially in teaching, we're starting to do, it's not critical race theory at all for the kids, but they're starting to have these diversity, equity, inclusion for teachers. And so it's taught by an African-American woman, which again, it's great to hear from that perspective. But at the same time, you're right that a lot of the emotional burden rests on them. So one of the answers I have is Jane Elliott. Jane Elliott is just such a boss, because she's not trying to. Yeah, she's such a boss, and I love her because, first of all, she's been doing this work since the 60s, when racism was hot in America, when it was the hottest commodity. And she had the culture. I mean, she had the bravery to go against the white standard and teach. So if you're not familiar with Jane Elliott, look up her work. And the reason why I think that's good is because that's true allyship. She's not trying to teach it from the mouth or from the viewpoint of somebody in the global majority or BIPOC. She's talking about dismantling the white supremacy identity that was built up in white people by the elites in the 1800s on purpose. We have that on document. So she's attacking that from the inside out, which is really great. So that's one of my answers.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm so glad, I'm glad I didn't roast her when I was bringing up that example, but I'm so glad you brought her up, because anyone who is asking what a great ally looks like, Jane Elliott is the only blueprint. Only blueprint.
Yes. And she doesn't do it for clout.
Yeah, because everyone does it for clout.
Everybody does it for clout.
Wokeism for Insta likes. That's literally the appropriation of activism that's happening right now. And so Jane Elliott is such a motherfucking G, because the way she talks about the entire reality and the history of things, the way she breaks it down, she specifically says, people of the global majority, Black people, Indigenous people, brown people, they don't need to tell you that you're racist. I will do it for them. She straight up will say that. And I'm like,
Yo,
that's what we need, because she's not coddling the fact that she knows her own culture is racist AF. She's looking them in the face and saying, yeah, correct me, because you can't. You're just going to deflect with anger because you recognize what you're trying to justify as
right.
superiority is actively the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
She
And on
pulls that
that,
out.
yeah, she points it out straight up. And the thing about that is that the reason why that's so great is because the reason a lot of people are so adverse to CRT is they're saying that it's going to teach division. Now, me
Yes.
and all them isms talked about earlier that we've already been teaching critical race theory in this country. We've been teaching race theory since day one because our whitewashed American history totally alienates the so-called savages, the indigenous, the pre-colonial cultures. Like it teaches Columbus is this hero. We're already teaching a form of racialized division and supremacy. So the reason that's so dope about Jane Elliott is the one thing I can understand about critical race theory is if you or your ancestors were poor and common whites, you didn't own slaves, and you don't necessarily feel responsible or that you should have to sit with the guilt of your ancestors, yo, I totally get that. So then Jane Elliott is your answer, because what she's talking about is calling out those bullshit divisions that were brought up and posed to white people, like in The Origins of Species by Charles Darwin, letting you disown and disassociate yourself from the system that oppresses people. Then you're absolutely right that you're not unconsciously contributing to it at that point because you called it out. So if your worry is that it's going to teach innocent white children white guilt and make them hate themselves, then look at Jane Elliott. She knows the facts of history, and she has no white guilt at all. She has white activism, and this residual white privilege that she may have, she absolutely uses every ounce of it to fight the system. So I think she's a great example to your question, Bjorn, when you're asking about what does that look like?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that just search up some of her videos and look at the response she gets from the community, and just look, white guilt has no power over her. Black victimhood has no power over her. Supremacy and privilege, she's just an all-around fucking gangster, and she doesn't care what nobody thinks. She doesn't do it for clout. So I think she's a great example of how we can kind of take the pressure off of BIPOC people on that front.
Yes, 100%. Look up her brown eye experiment. Brown eye, blue eye, Jane Elliott. Literally, like, honestly, I watch that shit every year for just to like just feel every time you watch it, you feel that. Everyone
if I did some
knows
shit like that. If I did something like that with my students, bro, it would be so controversial. But then again, it was for her too. It was so bad, but I wouldn't.
But yeah, she's a
G.
Do that with my... Look up her stuff. She's a G, 100%, 100%. All right, let's get into these bubbles.
Let's go. Spirit love.
Well, I am an LGBTQIA plus advocate on this platform. So since you are talking about, the rights of queer people, I was wondering if I could come on a chat for a little bit just to say my piece on that aspect, because I did realize that was part of the topic. So if you're able to give me, a little bit of time, I would love that, because ALLTHEMISMS knows me before, and I've done a lot of chats on straight allyship and also the ability to understand the queer community.
I think we can make a little space for that towards the end. Let's get through these ditties. I had a couple questions on the itinerary I wanted to ask her. It was a brief part. We were talking about representation and virtue signaling by corporations using gay and trans people and Black people to like what she called woke washing, to try to portray a certain image. It wasn't directly on the rights, but I'm sure you have something valuable to add. If you can, leave it in the comments, but if not, then we'll make room for you towards the end of the talk for sure.
Yeah.
All right, Eva, Shay.
Hey, so around anti-racism, this may be a bit off topic, but something I'd really like to see from white people is less performative activism, which is really just hashtagging activism, like posting Black pictures during blackout on Instagram, and yellow pictures to stop Asian hate, and wearing t-shirts and putting signs in the yard. And that's something that sort of irritates me about cancel culture sometimes, because it's just because you're not saying racist things and you're like, keeping the image of being anti-racist doesn't necessarily make you anti-racist. Like, you can still definitely have super racist ideologies while looking the part, because it's such a trend to look, like a super progressive person right now.
Woke washing.
So I want to see people like volunteering, donating, educating, even marching to an extent, but really like heavy level organizing, I think would be great.
Yes,
like the civil
100%.
rights era.
Agreed.
And
Woke washing.
it's absolutely woke washing. And Black Lives Matter, I have my own issues with some of the media perception and some of the conversation, but overall I agree with the premise. But what was really hard to see is, even in my community, is a lot of these Black Lives Matter, during the day it would be 80% Black, maybe 20% white, and at nighttime it would be like 60% white, and then you're helping us. Look, you're talking about people who don't have a political voice and or economic situation to be able to put together some of the movements that you do when you have more privilege. So
yeah,
I can understand these people coming out to the street, running around with their signs, feeling unheard, burning, like rioting and maybe burning something down. It does not help when a group of middle-class white people come out and do that, because you're using the tools of the tools of people without tools. Why? You have the tools. If you really want to support, don't come out there and incite and encourage and start burning things down in a Black community that you're going to leave and go home to. Put your money where your mouth is. Use some of your privilege and or your economic. If you got friends that are lawyers, if you have different resources than the people at the bottom, then use those. Don't use the tools of the oppressed. And also, even that, I get that you're frustrated, people of color, but like Eva was saying, is like, we got to get back to that real organizing, boycotting, using our Black dollar to be
Bernie Sanders, man.
What'd you say, Bernie Sanders?
Be Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders and Jane Elliott as a dynamic duo.
Oh my God, I would so vote for them.
Would kick ass completely. Oh my God. But
could you imagine?
Yo, they would kick ass. Oh my God, they would change the world. But like Eva was saying, perform like, and I'm trying to remember the terminology for it, but when we delude ourselves with some sort of form of performative accomplishment, we actually trick our brain into thinking that we actively did something that has impact. And especially when it coddles our comfort of what we are willing to put forth into the movement, because we like, and I'm saying we here as like, if you're going to speak as an ally to Black Lives Matter, right? If you are someone who has the privilege to look away or to distance yourself without receiving any of the harm from the backlash, then you know exactly when you're weaponizing that, because when times get tough, you're no longer there. You used your privilege to get out of something uncomfortable that largely is stemming from the very privilege that allowed you to turn away to begin with. And so when you're performative and when you're in those spaces, taking over voices, putting the spotlight on yourself, using it as a way to get Instagram likes or things like that, when you're doing all those things and you're actively challenging or tone policing someone whose active anger stems from intergenerational trauma, when you are telling them that they actively don't have a right to their words or how that anger manifests because it calls on your discomfort, then that is the very root of your performance and problem. Double P.
Right. And bringing up Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King did it peacefully. Why can't you? It's like, yo, y'all murdered him, so don't even go there. If you have to really, people don't know Martin Luther King of today. It's like the kids don't appreciate him because he's painted in this postage stamp version. We don't know how radical he really was because they censored and woke washed him into this acceptable version. But then the other thing that they changed is that they made it seem like Martin Luther King said that, and all white people in America were like, oh yeah, just loved him. Yo, he was shot at multiple times. He got his ass beat. He got his lip busted. He went to the hospital. He got bombed, his house bombed. If you would listen to his speech where he's talking about some of the death threats he got like, nigga, we're gonna blow your head off and burn your house down and kill your family. Like, let's stop pretending that if people of color or BIPOC people said something really nice, the world would just change for them. It's a tougher battle than that. So
Literally, you know what? Literally that, because when you look at every BIPOC culture, the main existence of their cultural and spiritual practices was predicated on love. So if you're going to say that being nice and doing all this, like, let's be unified stuff actively was the reason why people would change, our world would already be different. That is literally, and that is the point of decolonization and like learning the truth, because so many people still live in this fantasy land of like, oh, if the Europeans didn't come in, y'all would still be pooping in bushes and like, having sex outdoors. And I'm like, do you know anything? Do you actually know anything?
Again, that's why we don't teach pre-colonial history, is because there's certain things we don't teach in America specifically to protect the status quo's identity of what America
100%.
is and what the colonial West is. Because just listen to the beginning of me and All That Isms Talk, because we went over that already. Like, let's do some more of these ditties. But yeah, the history is out there for sure. Let's go. Eva Shay.
Like how Goldman Sachs was investing like all those millions and millions of dollars into Black women. I think that's dope. Like, I think direct mentorship and like more diversity training and like really checking up on diversity hires, because me, like, I was like the only Black person on my team and that shit was trash, but they loved to call me up when they wanted to do a commercial about Black Lives Matter. I didn't appreciate that shit. It was internal, but like still.
Some of these summer camps and some of these places I work for where I'm like one of the only Black folks there, girl, it just be like, I don't know if y'all watch Superstore, and they had dude in the wheelchair, the Black dude, and they try to get him in the picture for that. I swear they be playing that game with me, bro, and I'd be like, okay, look.
Bro, that episode was so funny. Oh my God. I love that show
the whole time. Yeah, that show is amazing.
I love that show. Even the episode where fudge, I forget his name. The manager, he was trying to get Glenn, was trying to get either Amy or the next chick to be the salsa.
The salsa. Bro. You're like, you sell out, and then Mateo did it or some shit. Oh my God, bro.
Oh my God.
That show,
so
bro, like essential workers, there's certain jobs that have stress, just like the person who's trapped in the office cubicle. So shows like The Office and Superstore, literally, I would watch those when I'm stressed out, bro.
Oh my God,
all the shit they deal with, like
Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Parks and Rec.
All of them. Is there a good one for teachers? Like, to me, all of those shows are the same, but specific to whatever their theme is. Like, that's why I love them.
Exactly. Anyway, let's hit these ditties. Real shit. Spirit love.
So I am an Asian person and I'm a queer person, but it seems like you don't want me on the chat. So what I'll do, because you offered like, well, we could have you on chat, but we'll just leave you to the comments because that'd be better. So essentially, that's fine. So as a person who is advocating for queer people, especially queer people of diversity, which I hope you do have on one day if it's not me, someone else, I definitely think we have to acknowledge the diversity within the queer community, because a lot of times we only focus on like the Caucasian queer perspective, and that is the issue. Also, there's 72 states in the United States where we don't have enough laws for queer people. For example, if a queer person gets harassed or gets let go for being queer, they're completely allowed to do that. Like, they are completely allowed to do that, companies. So there are a lot of issues even here in the States, but within diversity, we have, people in the African American community, the Latino community, Asian community. So that's why I would say I'm an expert in that.
Okay, let me answer that.
Yeah.
So Alex, we've been on this show for a while now. Like, it's almost 11:30 here, so we're gonna be wrapping up soon. So that's why we're saying, like, we want to finish up this, and then if we have some time at the end, pull you on to have that conversation, close it out. Now, additionally, I'm a queer woman in this conversation, so please do not put that erasure of there is not a queer voice in this conversation, because there is one. I totally respect your perspectives on this conversation, but like I said, we've been on this for a little while now, and we're
Yeah.
going to be closing up soon. And it's really a go with the flow type of conversation where we're talking more about a lot of the overall generalized oppressions that are interconnected.
Yeah.
And that's why we wanted to hear you in the comments, just to kind of get your insights, because like I said, it's been a long combo.
Yeah.
So but
And we
additionally,
appreciate your insight.
yeah, we appreciate you. And like as always, we'd always want to like open these types of conversations, but realistically as well, you know, it's okay if someone tells you that this panel just wants to stay on like these topics right now, and that maybe potentially that can be a conversation for later. So I just wanted to put that out there because, like I said, I love you. I totally love our conversations. But right now, we're just trying to close up and get some shut eye. Well, at least I get some shut eye soon. So
Yeah. Absolutely. Well said. All right. We got Eva.
Oh my god, I really love the term woke washing, and all the points being made here are like so valid and so great. And I think MLK had a quote that said, "Rioting is the voice of the unheard."
Yep.
These people are
Yes.
heard. They're heard. They don't need to riot. How you gonna appropriate riots?
So look, that's absolutely right, and that's true. And I say this to say that there are some issues that a small percentage of the white or the conservative community is not going to get. You can say it
Yeah.
like Martin Luther King. You could take a knee like Kaepernick. You can do it. They're not going to hear it. So I think that the media was definitely encouraging the Black Lives Matter movement, and pushing it forward and marketing and co-opting the thing so that they could keep this going, so that when solutions like defund the police and this or that, when these issues came up, the Democrats would be able to respond to a crisis and move that forward, because you can keep Black people in a perpetual state of crisis. And we
When you
know
feed
that
them
the Democrats,
breadcrumbs.
exactly, feed them breadcrumbs. Oh, they're hurting. We'll just trail them along. So you're absolutely right that when Black people, it's not that Black people aren't being heard on the Black Lives Matter issue. It's on every news channel. It's on all these signs. They've got all these fake woke commercials in the media. That's not the issue. The issue is, and I don't even think a majority of the Black people who are protesting know this, is that their real needs aren't being addressed. We don't need defund the police. We don't need Nancy Pelosi to put on kente cloth and take a knee like she's from Wakanda. We don't need it.
Dead. Duh. Dead.
What we need
Kill me.
is we need to build our social economic wealth, cycle our Black dollar within the community. And what would be helpful
Yes.
from the outside community is not gaslighting the struggle. Like, if you don't have anything to add or contribute, just stay quiet. We'll handle this.
Listen.
What we also need is when we come with powerful Black townships and organizations, we need the
Speak on
FBI,
it.
the CIA, and other organizations within the government, including the Democrats, to not try to co-opt, to not try to step in, to try not to stop regulating, and definitely to stop trying to create strife and division between our leaders. And hopefully we're past the age of assassinations and the burning of Black Wall Street. So as long as people stay out of our way, what we need is the white savior mentality to stop. We do not need the Democrats to try to secure our vote by responding and placating to these crises and putting shit all over the news that further victimizes Black people. We don't need it. So you're absolutely right about that. It's not that they're not being heard. It's that bullshit is being amplified in their ear, and it's confusing the shit out of these young Black folks. These ain't the OGs from the civil rights movement. Go ahead.
Literally speak on it. Speak on it. Imagine. Black Wall Street didn't burn down, right? Imagine. So everything we know that conceptualizes and garners the most funding is typically around the medical field, agriculture, tech right now, and then entertainment, right? We see that majority of our entertainment is appropriated from Black culture. So done, right? Medical and medicine, largely, again, Black culture, because especially looking at the history of medicine, one, was largely practiced by women.
Yep.
Yep, by women first, and then pushed out of those spaces by a lot of patriarchal cis hetero white men. But again, rooted in Black culture. We have agriculture, which is largely predicated on the migration patterns of African tribes, because First Peoples migrating across the earth while while concealing and saving seeds in their hairstyles that have significance to the culture, that again appropriated for consumption in today's society. But the only reason why a lot of our agricultural knowledge is in existence is because, one, that seed carrying and experimentation was cultivated by, again, Black women. And then you have I can't remember what the last thing I said in terms of making money, but all of these things are rooted in Black culture, Black knowledge in general, because Egypt had one of the first universities known to man.
Geometry, astrology, cosmology, science,
Everything,
medicine.
right?
Go off.
When Black Wall Street has the financial means to support the intellectual property, you really think all of these mega rich white people who are literally slaving out everyone under them because of the stolen intellectual property that they own, you really think they would be as poppin' as they are now? No. All of the rappers and artists would have gone to Black Wall Street. All of the people who are in the care and hospitality industries would be at Black Wall Street. All of the people, and you already know the people who had the most learned knowledge in that were people of color, because of all the servitude they had to go through. You have
and agriculture too, the sharecropping, the tilling the land, Native Americans.
Literally, and like when you have a community that is built by people of color, so Black people, you will attract Black people, and then you will attract brown people and Native indigenous people, because we all recognize who the common denominator is. And when we come together to build up our intergenerational wealth, our success, build up our towns, build up our talent, what is left for them to appropriate into consumption? Nothing.
And just to add on to that is Black Wall Street, was one of over 45 all Black prosperous communities that were burned down in race riots in the year 1919 and 1920 alone. That is not random white people who are mad at Black people and Black excellence. This was a mobilized movement by the newspapers who would put stories in to stir up white mobs. This was a threat to the national security. So when people say Black Wall Street, it's not just one. Within those 2 years, 1919, they called it the Red Summer of 1919, and 1920. These Bruce's Beach, Rodersville, there's so many that were burned down, flooded, or people ran out of their homes. So that's the first thing, is to not, once we're starting to build these communities. The other thing is, like, for example, I think reparations, giving Black people in America a check in their current state of mind, is a bad idea. I think that'll just be a way to make yourself feel good and say, hey, we did everything we could. And Black people, let's be honest, in the state they're in, are going to spend it on Jordans, Gucci, some material dumb shit, right? So here's what it is. A lot of our ancestors fought hard for civil rights. To get the Civil Rights Bill passed, people were bitten by dogs, hit with water hose, arrested, beaten, and lynched, right? Ran out of town. So the fucked up thing about it today is, when America decided to subsidize Black farmers to give them a leg up after the 200 years of economic suppression and the economic privilege of white people, just to make up for that, they subsidized Black farmers. No money left the hands of the government, blah, blah, blah. We just subsidized Black farmers. Do you know that a collective group of white conservatives sued the government on the basis of the Civil Rights Act that we fought for to block, and say that it was racially divisive because they were helping one group?
Wow.
See, that's an example. Absolutely. They used the Civil Rights Act against us. So
garbage.
Etsy is you know what Etsy is? It's that online selling platform.
Yeah.
Etsy decided to put Black content creators on the front page so they could get more exposure. Do you know that white people, again, sued them? Same
What?
thing with Uber Eats. Uber Eats was in my neighborhood. They were having it so that if you order from black businesses, you get no delivery fee, right? White people sued Uber. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
So you can't stand against every bit of progress and every helping hand that is given this community and then say that you're about a fair start, because equity and equality are different. So sorry, just I went up on a tangent. To answer Eva Shay's question, you're absolutely right that the days of rioting and protesting, constantly stuck in that cycle of screaming for change that they're never going to give us. We know the only thing that ever has changed the Black American experience is Black people coming together with Black people, our people of color. We will say it like that. And then like All Them Isms said, in Canada during the quarantine, the only thing that changed their situation is people who started grassroots movements to get food to the elderly, get food to each other, and make a peer-to-peer system. So the government
Yep.
is the only thing they're ever going to give us
Useless.
is half-ass shit like defund the police,
Yep.
this and that shit that makes you on this welfare state mentality of begging for crumbs from the Democrats. Get over them.
Yep.
Over them.
100%. 100%. 100%.
Sorry, we went in.
No, I like, you said it. Like, we can bounce off each other for hours. Like, there's
Hours.
so much to talk about.
We got to schedule a number 2 for reals.
Yeah, we def do. Like, I know this was like really last minute, but hella
No,
work.
I appreciate it. Absolutely. I know you got to get to bed soon. So if we don't get a couple ditties, we can just say our closing remarks, and then we can just, I'll send you an instant. We can set up our next show and topic. We don't honestly need a topic, girl. We just be going off back and forth. And thank you so much to everybody in the comments. Thank you,
Yes.
Eva, Bjorn, Royalty, Candace. Thanks for the other people that came in and left some dope ass messages who are not here right now, because y'all could just fuel us to go forever.
Yes, 100%. Honestly, I feel like in closing, just thinking about everything, not just from what we talked about, but in general, just thinking about what we think about.
Ooh.
We
Okay.
we have been so conditioned to seek the approval and the opinions of other people we deem to be more worthy of praise than our own hard work, that we stifle our voice to the point that even the learner within us, the student, is too insecure to actively learn because we assume that our voice would be wrong. And the only reason we got to this point in society is because we had to learn from our mistakes and from the failures and from the discomfort and from the emotions that actively teach us to hide away from not only ourselves but the people around us. And so when we reclaim that conversation of critical thinking, even in our understanding of what critical thinking means, we need to unpack that and unlearn what we've been taught about it, because you don't need to critically think to be productive. Like in this, and when I mean, like what I say there is like, you don't need to constantly think of critical thinking as a means to be productive, that you constantly need to be, assessing things to make money from it, to constantly be on for
Right.
other people, doing this for that person. Critical thinking really means like thinking about anything and everything, especially when it relates to your existence, your authenticity, your autonomy, your ethics, your morals, how you show up for yourself, how you show up for your community. And at the end of the day, the idea that we all experience the same emotional reaction and impact when something
Yes.
strikes us in that way. And so it doesn't matter what it is, if we can feel the same emotional response based on our circumstance, that means we know exactly what other people are going through, yet we try to justify the fact that we are somewhat different. But
Right.
at the end of the day, the fact that we can empathize with one another means that we're more similar than different. And that alone should teach us that when we're in a point and a position of not only being someone who's of privilege, but also in their own way an oppressor. We need to sit with that and critically think about that and figure out the ways in which we can actively show up for ourselves. Because when we unlearn and we unpack, our lives get better because we are living in our body. And now the more authentically you can live, the less you have to mask. And that means the people around you no longer have control of what you put on your face in order to be seen. And so when you finally get to the point where your authenticity, where your autonomy, where your individuality allows you the ability to recognize that you could have been anyone, you start to learn how to be humble and how to listen to other people, how to be mindful in the moment, and how to do something when you see something happen.
Flames. Miss Intellectual, vote for her, y'all. Stereo Queens coming over. Yes,
oh yeah, I
she
need to
didn't
go.
even
I
know.
need to look that up.
She didn't even know.
Dead.
All right. So my little 2 cents to end it off is, just like she said, there's a way to balance being an individual in yourself, knowing yourself, investing in your emotional maturity and in your emotional sense of being, right? And there's a way to break away from the dependencies. If you're confident in yourself, then you're less easily manipulated by those who are trying to put you into a collective narrative. And that could be a right or left wing narrative, anything that they can use to play onto your predictive programming or your predictive behavior to get you to have the problem reaction solution, which we talked about is something that the elites at the top of this pyramid have been working on psychological ways and think tanks to advance their agendas over the common behavior of the status quo. They are good at public manipulation of mass opinion. And the way you can work against that is by finding that inner peace and that emotional security, like we were talking about in the ancient cultures, focusing on knowing yourself, not giving in. It's totally okay to point out the wrongs in our society as it comes to capitalism, if it comes to race. And we all need to separate ourselves from the truth so we don't feel personally attacked when someone brings up a valid criticism about whatever we're going through. If you're white and somebody brings up a good point of a historical fact that happened within Western colonization of Europeans, you have to separate yourself and not be triggered. If you're Black and somebody brings up a valid criticism about inner city violence or the dependency on the Democrats, we need to be separate from that information and not feel personally attacked for it. And we, as all people, need to come together and stop gaslighting each other, because when we exacerbate these divisions, we're only supporting the cause of the one person who's capitalizing off of all of us being against each other while they rake in the profit and further exhaust the planet's resources to get richer to the point where they can privatize land and everything that we, the people, should own, to the point where we have no power. So in closing, I'll say we need to detach ourselves from the corporate mainstream media's role in social dysfunction. We need to be sharing and having more honest conversations with each other. If you're white, we need to be more like Jane Elliott. If you're Black, you need to be more like the revolutionaries and the ancestors who were not subjugated and part of this system. Don't try to defeat it through the system. You have to work outside of it. If we can do that and see each other as allies, true allies, then we can have freedom from all them isms. You see what I did there?
Hey, yes. Boom goes the dynamite. I love that.
Okay.
Dad,
we got a new series coming out, John.
Yo, facts. And like everything you just said, 100%. And just to like quickly plug this in for people to think about, because like if we're talking about getting to the point where we actively see change and that requires us to decolonize our minds, you need to recognize where religion needs to take an exit out of your life. But that's a whole
not
different
relationship with God and the Creator, but religion specifically.
But religion, 100%. But that's a whole conversation for another day.
Hey, and and there will be a conversation on another day. So real quick, shout out to Bjorn who dropped some gems. Shout out to Royalty inside my DNA. Hey, shout out to Candace,
Yo.
may or may not be. Shout out to Kay Angel and to Justasia Z. We really appreciate y'all. I'm with one of the stereo queens and deep intellectual critical thinkers and individuals. All them isms. This is Freedom Reign, the destroyer of narratives, the man in the middle who cannot be bought. We really appreciate y'all for coming through. Do you want to close us out? Isms?
No, I cannot top that. I as much as eloquent I can be sometimes, like, nah, that was fire. I will just say my job.
Yeah. So we'll end on that note, because if you follow your true calling and be your authentic self and stand out and have conversations that are difficult for others, and you're doing it not out of ego or clout, but to find that higher truth, then you, like us, can have freedom from all those isms. We appreciate you.
That was sick.
All right. Have a good night.
Have a great night, morning, afternoon, wherever you're from, everyone.
All right, everybody. Peace.
Bye.